Chapter 151. Crackle. After a string of loud firecrackers, the new byway building was surrounded by diners who came to watch the fun. Before the opening of the byway building, they had heard the news that this restaurant was related to Su Li, the first talented girl in Yunjing City. Su Li was famous. At this moment, some romantic talents who heard the news all came to see if they could see Su Li. Su Huanli, who was dressed in red clothes, was full of joy. He stood in front of the door and bowed with his hands folded in front. Then he raised his head and said loudly, "I am Su Huanli, and Su Li is my second daughter. Today is the first day of the opening of the byway building. All the wine and dishes are half price." As soon as Su Huanli finished his words, the newly recruited waiters of the restaurant immediately came out to greet the guests. They even said Su Li. Obviously, they were ordered by Su Huanli. Miss Su is not only good at poetry, but also good at cooking. The signature dishes of this restaurant are all developed by Miss. That's right. Miss Su's cooking is comparable to that of the god of cookery. Any ingredients in her hands can be turned into magic. It's delicious. The waiters tried their best to brag. Many people who had watched the fun became interested and followed the crowd into the byway building. In the blink of an eye, the byway building was full. The smell of the beggar's chicken filled the street. More and more people came here following the smell. It was exactly the same as when the restaurant was opened in the Desu town. Su Huanli saw that the business of the store was very good on the first day, and he was very happy. The older, the wiser. If his mother didn't ask him to use the name of Su Li to attract customers, he really couldn't think of this trick. Su Li was asked to help in the shop by Su Huanli. She saw it, but didn't say much, because she knew that even if she went up and said it, she would only get a scolding from Su Huanli. Moreover, Su Huanli didn't realize that it was not the Yunjing city where he could do whatever he wanted. Su Li smiled faintly and glanced at the deserted Yi house diagonally opposite. Before the opening of the byway building, the business of the Yi house was quite good. But today, the byway building's wine and dishes were half price, and the taste was good. It would definitely affect the business of the Yi house. Presumably, the owner of the Yi house should be angry at this moment. The owner of the one-way residence was indeed furious. To be precise, he was so furious that he wanted to kill someone. A bunch of trash. If you can't even compare to a country bumpkin's restaurant, then what use do I have for you? Guards, drag them away and feed them to the dogs. Young miss, please spare my life. Spare me. Wu Xiuxiu put her hands on her hips and pointed at the large group of waiters and shopkeepers kneeling in front of her. She was so angry that her chest was heaving and her face was pale. She was the owner of Yiji House. Ordinary people didn't have the right to know this information, but anyone with a bit of status and background knew it clearly. Su Li had just been in Yunjing City for a month. She was the most talented woman and the most beautiful woman in Yunjing City. Now even her restaurant was completely suppressed. Where'd she put her face? If this could be tolerated, what could be tolerated? Little sister, don't be impatient. This matter is not entirely their fault. Wu Jin comforted his sister in a gentle voice. He turned his head and his expression immediately became cold. You can avoid the death penalty, but you can't escape the punishment. Go and receive the punishment. Upon hearing this, the panic-stricken shopkeeper was overjoyed. He immediately knelt down and kowed out. He was moved to tears. "Thank you, young master. Thank you for sparing my life, young master." As he said that, he immediately led his subordinates and left in fear. "Brother." Wu Xiuxiu waved Wu Jin's hand and pouted. She was full of grievance. "Su Li is clearly bullying me. My restaurant is called Yiji House, and her restaurant is called Byway Building. She also took away all my business. How can your sister face others in the future?" Wu Jin couldn't help but laugh. He touched his sister's hair and teased. "You already have a way, don't you? You sent Anjo and others out without telling me. If my father knows it, you will suffer." Wu Xiuxiu's face turned golden, and then she smiled embarrassedly. She pinched the corner of her clothes and said, Xiu was angry, and nothing happened. Wu Jin's face suddenly became cold. He reprimanded her. "Xiu, you are too insensible this time. Anjio and others are the secrets of our Wu family. If they're exposed to the Ling family or other families in the imperial court, do you know the consequences? Oh, Wu Xiuxiu stamped her feet. She was angry and said, I am angry. Suli is just a servant girl from a poor family. How can she compete with me? Brother, you don't help me. You even blame me. Are you still my brother? As she said, Wu Xiuxiu's eyes turned red. Wu Jin wiped away her tears helplessly. If I don't love you, who else will? Of course, I will help you with Su Li's business. But don't act alone in the future, in case you give yourself away. Do you understand? Wu Xiuxiu immediately smiled through tears. She hugged Wu Jin's waist and said coquettishly, I thought you were reluctant to hurt her because she was beautiful. Wu Jin gently stroked his sister's soft hair. A glimmer of light flashed through his eyes. He whispered, How could it be? Even if there are 10,000 Su Li, she can't compare with my Xiu. Ha ha ha, brother, you are lying. Wu Xiuxiu immediately laughed happily. In this world, even her parents' love for her was less than half of that of her brother. It was great that she could be her brother's sister. Last time, Anjio and others failed. I have helped you find out the reason. Wu Jin touched Wu Xiuxiu's small nose and said, Do you know that Anjio almost fought with Chen Gong? If Chen Gong didn't have scruples because of Su Li, he would have noticed it. Wu Xiuxiu's eyes flashed with fear. She immediately said angrily, How could that bitch be so lucky? One of the houses in the alley is Chun Gong's ancestral house. I just happened to meet it. Wu Jin shook his head and said, And Su Li is smart enough. After escaping, she didn't call a carriage on the road. She always walks in the downtown streets. It is not good to take action for the time being. How can it be? Wu Xiuxiu's happy face suddenly disappeared. Her beautiful eyes were full of fierce light. She said, Brother, you should take action as soon as possible. I don't want to see that face one more day. Wu Jin sighed helplessly and turned to look at the door of the Baiwei building. Suddenly, he saw two familiar figures. His pupils suddenly shrank. How could they appear here? Ling Ping calmly pushed the wheelchair into the Baiwei building. Ling Li, who was full of evil, was sitting in the wheelchair. As soon as they entered the door, the noisy hall of the restaurant immediately fell into a dead silence. Even the rich childs who were eating and drinking were frightened. They stopped what they were doing and became stiff. How could they come here? Seeing this, Ling Ping couldn't help but smile bitterly in his heart. What did this guy know to be shy? He insisted that Ling Ping accompany him to come here. Didn't he know how sensational it would be if he appeared with me? Thinking of this, Ling Ping showed a gentle smile on his face and said, Today, I just come to eat with my brother. His words were like a stone thrown into a calm lake. Many childs who claimed to be talents immediately threw away a handful of broken silver and fled from another door. In the blink of an eye, more than half of the people on the first floor left. Su Huanli's hands were tired from receiving money. He saw many broken silver on the table. He was happy. Regardless of the identity of the two people who came, he immediately went to them. He rubbed his hands and said with a smile, Guests, do you want to eat or stay here? He said two people, but actually he looked at Ling Ping. One of them was as calm as an official, and the other was a disabled man with messy clothes. Ling Ping knew who he should ask, even if he thought with his toes. But this time, he was obviously wrong. Old guy, are you blind? An angry shout almost scared Su Huanli to jump up. He looked down and was immediately sprayed by Ling Ping's saliva. Damn you, don't you see me? Ask your daughter to come out and serve me dishes and wine. Otherwise, I will tear down your restaurant. Su Huanli was stunned by the scolding. It was the first time for him to see such an arrogant master who would tear down the restaurant. His heart was filled with rage, but before he could vent it out, a waiter trembled as he walked forward and stuttered, General Ling, young Master Ling. Miss is in the private room on the second floor. Please come in. Ling Li heard it and smiled. He pointed at the waiter and said fiercely, What are you waiting for? Show me the way. The waiter was startled and immediately rushed to the second floor. Ling Ping shook his head helplessly. His brother's temper couldn't be changed. Fortunately, he knew to threaten Ling Ping. In the past, he was arrogant and thought that everyone in the world knew him. Wherever he went, he would tear down the restaurant and make the Ling family lose a lot of money. Seeing Ling Ping lift the wheelchair with one hand and go upstairs, Su Huanli came to his sense in a daze. His body seemed to be blown by the cold wind, and he couldn't help shivering. He caught a frightened waiter and asked about the background of the person. He was instantly stunned. Just now, he almost scolded the most arrogant master in the whole Yunjing city. The Baiwei building was almost torn down. For a moment, Su Huanli was extremely grateful to the waiter who interrupted him. There was no anger in his heart, but only a deep uneasiness. Su Li should not make that person angry. Entering the private room on the second floor, Ling Ping saw Su Li sitting and waiting here. He couldn't help but be amazed. Last time, he was upset at the banquet and didn't pay attention to her. Now the environment was changed. He really felt that this woman was as beautiful as the rumors said. She deserved the first title in Yunjing City. I'm Su Li. Nice to meet you, General Ling and Master Ling. Su Li stood up and bowed slightly. Her voice was as ethereal as a bird and natural and graceful. Ling Ping praised her secretly. He pushed Ling Li into the room and said with a smile, Miss Su Li, you don't have to be so polite. I come here today because my brother has admired you for a long time. He especially comes here to catch up with you. Although Ling Ping said the polite words, he felt pity in his heart. Although Brotherly was the best brother in his heart, to be honest, how could Brotherly deserve such an excellent woman? He was over 20 years old, and Brotherly was 17 years old. Both of them didn't get married and had children. His mother and grandmother were worried. It was not difficult for him to find a wife with his glory. However, Brotherly was handicapped and had a foppish temperament. Any family that was slightly particular would not be willing to marry their daughter to him. As for those who harbored evil intentions and wanted to enter the Ling family, mother and grandmother were worried that they would mistreat Brotherly. Ling Ping remembered that his mother heard that Brotherly liked someone and wanted to see her. She was so happy and specially asked him to help. Alas, Su Li glanced at the playboy who was sitting in the wheelchair and drooling. She couldn't help but laugh and said, General Ling, I'm really flattered. But the identity of your brother, I'm afraid that I don't have the luck to enjoy it. As the hierarch of the Yinma cult, she really didn't have the luck to enjoy it. Ling Ping smiled bitterly. Su Li's words were naturally disgusting to him. Ling Li was angry. Su Li, it was rare for him to find a chance to see her. How could she push him away? Brother, you go out first. I'll talk to Miss Su Li in person. Chapter 152. I see. Ling Li impatiently pushed Ling Ping away. He was extremely bad-tempered. Ling Ping left the room and looked back several times. He sighed in his heart that the boy was so rude and left a worse impression on Su Li. How could he get the beauty back? Don't peep or eavesdrop. Suddenly, Ling Ping heard Ling Li's voice behind him. He almost fell down. His face suddenly darkened. Originally, he really wanted to listen to what they could say, but now he was pointed out by Ling Li, so he was not interested. They were at odds with each other, so they definitely couldn't talk together. It was estimated that Brother Li would be driven out soon. After Ling Ping went out, Ling Li tilted his head and pushed the wheelchair to Su Li. His original vulgar and thirsty expression became light and gentle. His eyes that were wandering on Su Li's body became calm. He immediately became a different person from the playboy he was a moment ago. Su Li raised her eyebrows and teased, Child Ling, your acting skills are very good. Ling Li spread his psychic awareness and saw that Ling Ping had gone to the window on the second floor to drink. His eyes lit up and he lowered his voice. It is not difficult for you to see the situation of the Ling family. I was poisoned when I was a child. It happened, so... Su Li looked indifferent. Stop. I am not interested in your past. What do you want me to do? I told you in the days to town that we would never meet again. It seems that you are forgetful. Ling Li frowned slightly. He felt that Su Li was estranged from him. It seemed that she didn't want to have anything to do with him. However, his own situation, it was good that she didn't get involved. Ling Li smiled indifferently and finally put away the different feeling in his heart. He assumed the posture of a hierarch of a big sect and said, How about making a fair deal? How much do I need to pay to cure Ling Qinglan? Suli smiled sweetly. Qinghu, he is your right-hand man. If you want a fair deal, I am afraid that Hierarch Ling can't afford it. Ling Li looked calm, and his eyes were firm. He said, go ahead. No matter how much he paid, he would save Ling Qinglan. No one was suitable for the position of Qinghu except him. Suli sat down against Ling Li and stretched out a finger. I want the full moon. Swish. Ling Li was horrified and shocked. Even if he knew that Suli would embarrass him, he did not expect that she would make such an excessive request. You're making things difficult for me. Ling Li made a low growl in his throat, but Suli smiled brightly. Is there anything in the world that Hierarch Ling finds difficult? Yunjing City is your territory. If the treasures auctioned in your territory fall into the hands of others, isn't it a joke? The full moon was the legendary treasure that would be auctioned in the Yunjing auction house 1 month later. It was said that this treasure could open up the dantian of the purple mansion of the full moon and break the shackles of heaven and earth. It could break through to a higher realm without leaving the secular world and improve the power of understanding. It was really a rare treasure. The only regretful thing was that this treasure was a natural spirit pill, and it possessed an extreme yin and cold nature. Only women could consume it. If a man were to consume it, he would immediately be frozen into a popsicle. Even so, there were many talented girls in the martial arts circle. A full moon was enough to set off a reign of terror in Yunjing City. Even if the Yinma cult intervened, it would be difficult for them to escape unscathed. Ling Li originally wanted to wait and see, and then look for opportunities. Whether he could get the treasure or not depended on his luck. But Su Li's words made it necessary to get the full moon. If Ling Qinglan's life can't even be compared with a full moon, how can it be fair? Su Li smiled leisurely. In addition to the full moon, you also need to prepare a branch of the Kurong tree. Kurong tree? Ling Li was confused. I have never heard of this name. Besides, aren't your requirements too much? Su Li got close to Ling Li's ear and whispered, in the words of your hometown, is the branch of the phoenix perches on the phoenix tree. In short, it is almost the same. Only when I find that thing, Ling Qinglan's life can be saved. Otherwise, even if I don't have the panacea, how can I detoxify? Ling Li's eyelids twitched, and his eyes were full of complexity. Why do you say that my hometown is not here? Su Li got close to Ling Li and almost hugged him, which made the latter couldn't help but hold his breath. Su Li noticed it and chuckled softly. She touched his lips with her fingertips, which were cold to the touch. She said, because you told me in person a long, long time ago. Ling Li's heart beat faster, but he didn't expect that she was joking. He couldn't help but move Su Li's fingertips away angrily. There was a trace of anger in his voice. Forget it if you don't want to say it. Don't beat around the bush. What I said is true. Su Li sighed softly in her heart. She stood up straight and said coldly, only when you see those two things, Ling Qinglan can be saved. Child Ling, please go back. Ling Li turned the wheelchair expressionlessly. Suddenly, he felt that the person behind him grabbed the handle of the wheelchair and gently pushed it up. In a trance. He seemed to have seen this scene before. Was it a dream? Suddenly, Su Li transmitted the sound in silence coldly in his heart and interrupted his recollection. The Lianshi cult and the Huan sect are not easy to deal with. If you are not strong enough, don't force yourself. I don't want the body of immunity to all poisons I made by myself to die in vain. Hearing the former's cold transmission, Ling Li smiled and couldn't help but transmit the sound in silence. I cherish my life more than anyone else. Miss Su, if you have time to care about others, you'd better think about your own situation. Before he finished his words, Ling Li suddenly felt a strong force behind him. The wheelchair was pushed far away and almost hit the door. Ling Li was immediately angry. When he was about to speak, he heard Su Li deliberately raise her voice. Child Ling and I are not the same kind of people. We don't agree with each other. Child Ling, please go back. You. Ling Li stared slightly. The next moment, Ling Ping opened the door as expected. Feeling the unpleasant atmosphere in the room, he couldn't help but smile bitterly. He pushed Ling Li to apologize and went downstairs. You win. Hearing the last sentence from the playboy in the wheelchair, Su Li suddenly laughed. She laughed so much that she couldn't stand up straight. Drops of tears fell on the ground. Finally, no one knew whether she was crying or laughing. Su Huanli and Su Li returned to the Su house at 9 o'clock. The former was jubilant, while the latter was calm, as usual. Su Qingtan had been waiting at the door for a long time. When he saw the carriage coming back, he was relieved and went to greet them. Qingtan, you didn't see it. The restaurant just opened today, and it was full of guests. If it wasn't for the half price on the first day, the profit could be at least 2,000 taels. It won't take long for our Su family to buy that shop and gain a firm foothold in Yunjing City. Su Qingtan was also happy for his family. He pulled Su Li and said, Father, second sister, you must be tired. Go in and have a rest. Since the business of the Byway building is stable, let second sister go to the National Academy. She can't fall behind in her studies. Su Huanli was unhappy when he heard that. Today, because Su Li showed up from time to time in the restaurant, the business was so good. If Su Li was not there, the restaurant couldn't make so much money. But now Su Qingtan was a high-ranking official of the Supreme Judiciary. What he said was also reasonable. He couldn't stop Su Li from going to the National Academy for the sake of money. That reason was not tenable at all and would definitely be vetoed by Su Qingtan in the end. In this case, it was better to try to win Su Li's favor. Thinking of this, Su Huanli nodded and said with a smile, Of course. Studies are more important. Li, don't go to the Byway building tomorrow. Su Li nodded obediently and smiled sweetly. Okay. Thank you, father. Su Qingtan was also gratified. His father finally understood his second sister. If he was still like his aunt and grandma, he would not be as helpless as he used to be in the Desa town and could only watch helplessly. The three of them went back to their courtyards to rest. When Su Li returned to her own courtyard, Mammy Li had already prepared bath water and supper. After Su Li took a bath and changed her clothes, it was past midnight after supper. But she found that the light in Su Qingtan's room was still on. She thought for a moment and walked to the door with the lamp. Then she pushed the door and went in. Su Qingtan was reading a case file carefully. When he heard the sound, he looked up and saw Su Li. He couldn't help but smile. Second sister, why are you here? I had supper and saw that the light in your room was still on. I was worried, so I came to have a look. Su Li said and walked to Su Qingtan. What are you doing? It's late. You'd better have an early rest. Su Qingtan felt warm in his heart. He bowed his head and smiled. I see. I'll go to bed after reading this file. I'll accompany you. I haven't read with you for a long time. What are these? Su Li picked up the file and glanced at the words, The Massacre of the Yi Family. She couldn't help but stare. These are the unsettled case files of the Supreme Judiciary. Su Qingtan smiled. He took the scroll from Su Li's hand and unfolded it. Then he put it back in Su Li's hand. These are confidential. Only the officers of the Supreme Judiciary can read them. But it's rare for second sister to read with me. I'll let you have a look. Thank you, eldest brother. Su Li thanked him and stood behind Su Qingtan to read quietly. The file she took happened to be the first volume, which briefly introduced the Yi family. 13 years ago, the Yi family was also a rich and powerful family in Yunjing City. The head of the family, General Yi, was the deputy general of General Ling Feiqing at that time. The family was prosperous. However, no one knew what enemies they provoked. On the 15th of August, the whole family was exterminated overnight. None of the 105 people of the Yi family survived. Even the babies in swaddling clothes were crushed to death. It's almost the 15th of August. The unsettled case of the Yi family, which lasted for 13 years, became 14 years. But there is still no clue. I really don't know why Ling Qinglan is so persistent. Su Qingtan sighed. There were thousands of unsettled cases in the Supreme Judiciary. However, Brother Ling didn't investigate other cases. Instead, he had to investigate a case which happened so long ago. Wasn't he asking for a snub? Su Li heard it and said with a smile, Maybe Lord Ling is related to this family. Only a case related to himself will make him so persistent. Su Qingtan couldn't help but shake his head and laugh. The people of the Yi family have died long ago. Ling Qinglan is the posthumous son of General Ling Feihe. How could he be related to the Yi family? I heard from the people of the Supreme Judiciary that he was humiliated because of this case. He didn't deserve the title of the first person in the Supreme Judiciary. So he worked hard. But in my opinion, Brother Ling shouldn't be so naive. I see, Suli responded. Her eyes were shining. She seemed to think of something. At this moment in the Ling mansion, Ling Qinglan rarely came here. Both Mrs. Gu and Xiaomeng were very happy. They quickly ordered people to prepare wine and dishes. Qinglan, you haven't come here for a long time. Mrs. Gu picked a whole bowl of dishes for Ling Qinglan and blamed him. Why do you live outside? Your parents died early. Why don't you live here? Your brother Ping is not at home all the year round. Ling Li is a little bastard. I need someone to show filial piety to me. Ling Qinglan's face rippled with a touch of warmth. He said with a smile, Grandma, I am used to living in the Supreme Judiciary. I miss you, so I come to see you. Sometimes you are more cunning than your brother Li. I just don't know. Chapter 153. It was very late at night. Mrs. Gu and Xiaomeng went to bed one after another without eating much. Ling Qinglan temporarily rested in the Ling mansion tonight. When the servants went to bed, he immediately got up and came to Ling Li's courtyard. At this moment, the light was still on in the study of Ling Li's courtyard. Looking at the yellow light, Ling Qinglan smiled and pushed the door in. What a rare guest, Ling Qinglan. More than half a year has passed. You finally remember that you're a member of the Yinma cult? Ling Li reclined on the wheelchair and said with a faint smile. Ling Qinglan's expression remained unchanged. He sat opposite Ling Li at the table and said seriously, Although I didn't come, the news of the Tinya house has never stopped. I never forget my duty. Ling Xian came in at this time and poured a cup of hot tea for Ling Qinglan. Warm yourself up. It's late at night. I am your nominal cousin anyway. I should care about you. Ling Li waved his hand. Ling Qinglan couldn't help but smile and said, You are still the same. No matter what is going on outside, you look indifferent. Then he picked up the tea and put it to his mouth. Ling Li said untimely, You are still the same. You don't say anything when there is something wrong with the cold poison. You also let Su Qingtan take over the pending case of the Yi family. Do you really think that you can hide the news from me because you are the owner of the Tinya house? Ling Qinglan stopped and was silent for a moment. Finally, he took a sip of tea and raised his head to say seriously, I don't escape. I just accept the fact calmly. I also want to find the enemy who destroyed the Yi family by myself. However, God doesn't open his eyes. I can only entrust it to others. Su Qingtan is very smart. Although he can't take over the position of Qinghu, he can continue to help me investigate cases in the Supreme Judiciary. Ling Li sighed softly and said, If you said so 1 year ago, I would definitely agree with you. I would definitely agree with your method, but now no. You have to help me get the full moon sword. How can you leave it alone? During this time, even if you want to vomit blood, you have to think of a perfect strategy to get the full moon sword from the wolves and leopards. And Ling Li threw a note to Ling Qinglan. Ling Qinglan took it and opened it. A strangely shaped branch was drawn on it, and the word Ku Rong was attached next to it. Activate all the power of the Tinya house and find this branch at all costs. Then, your task will be completed. After hearing that, Ling Qinglan was expressionless. After a long time, he stood up and nodded slightly. I know. You saved me once. I will help you fulfill these 2 requirements. Ling Li smiled evilly and stared at Ling Qinglan, who was calm. He suddenly asked, EMO, what am I to you? Ling Qinglan's eyes changed, and he finally became serious. He hadn't heard of this name for 13 years. Sure enough, after a long time, everything would become unfamiliar. For Ling Li, he was disdainful and disgusted at first. Then, when he found out about his true identity, he was astonished and in awe. After Ling Li found a way to help him break through the inborn hurdle and save his life, he was grateful. Finally, when he learned that he still couldn't escape the fate, he became indifferent. Who was Ling Li to him? He really didn't think about it. The study became quieter and quieter. It seemed that Ling Li's question was difficult to answer. Ling Qinglan was silent for a long time and finally couldn't give an answer. "Give me time, and I will give you the answer." After saying that, Ling Qinglan left without looking back. Ling Xian couldn't bear it and whispered, "Master, don't you tell him?" "If—" Ling Li held his chin with one hand and smiled. "If I can't even trust this guy, I can't be the hierarch of the Yinma cult." The next day, Su Li went out early in the morning, but she didn't go to the National Academy. The people arranged by Ling Li to protect her secretly followed her, and suddenly found that they were lost. "What's the matter?" A young man dressed as a peddler was confused. He didn't see an ordinary woman in coarse linen pass by him. The people of Shalu cult practiced the same practice method. Su Li could see at a glance that the people who had been protecting her secretly were from Shalu cult, so she didn't drive them away. If they were others, she would have killed them. Today, she didn't go to the National Academy. Yesterday, when she read in Su Qingtan's study, she suddenly realized that the plan to be implemented later had to be carried out in advance. The forces in Yunjing City were complicated. The structure was not as simple as that in the Qinghe town. She could know the general situation after a little exploration. In Yunjing City, if there were no spies and spies, she would be like a blind person and couldn't grasp the situation at all. Just like now, she had no way to know how many people of the Lianshi cult, the Hawan sect, and other forces entered the city. So, she went to the Hongyan house today. Passing by a clothes shop, Su Li had become a handsome child and walked to the lane of brothels. There were few rich childs who came to drink in the lane of brothels during the day. It was even rarer to see a good-looking child like Su Li. As soon as she appeared, many prostitutes waved their handkerchiefs at the window. "Master, come and play, child, I am very powerful. I promise that you will be comfortable." "Master," Su Li smiled, but she never looked at those prostitutes. She went straight to the Hongyan house with the best position. Those prostitutes stamped their feet when they saw her. She went to see Chu Fox again. These men are really good. As soon as Su Li entered the Hongyan house, the procuress, whose face was painted red and white, greeted him with a smile. She said, "Child, you look strange. I am afraid that it is the first time for you to come to our Hongyan house. Do you want me to introduce you to the girls in the Hongyan house?" Su Li retreated a few steps without leaving a trace and said with a warm smile, "I heard that Miss Chu Lu of your Hongyan house is excellent at playing the zither. I came here because of your reputation. Mom, I hope you can arrange it for me." When the procuress heard that, her eyes lit up. She gently patted Su Li's shoulder and winked at her. "Oh, she's the most popular girl in our Hongyan house. The price?" Su Li still smiled and said, "Mom, just tell me." Hearing that, the procuress immediately went upstairs and shouted, "Lu, welcome the guest. A child wants to listen to your zither. He is a rare, elegant guest." "Got it, Mom. I will prepare now. Please wait for a moment." A soft voice came from upstairs. It was so soft that it could melt one's bones. Many playboys who were drinking in the Hongyan house during the day couldn't help but feel excited. Su Li was full of jealousy and hatred. Chu Lu, the bitch, not only cared about money but also appearance. She was really picky. Someone like him, who was poor and ugly, had no chance at all. Su Li showed good self-restraint. She sat downstairs and didn't look at other prostitutes. After a while, a good-looking maid came downstairs and invited Su Li to go upstairs. Su Li thanked her and went upstairs. The little maid's eyes were full of stars. She wished she could be a miss to serve this child. Su Li went to the door and gently knocked on the door. A fresh and elegant voice came from the door, which was completely different from the soft voice before. "Child, you are really elegant. I, Chu Lu, should play a song for you. Please come in." Su Li smiled and opened the door. A faint fragrance came into her nose. What she saw was a very elegantly decorated room. It seemed that the person living here was a scholar, not a prostitute. The maid quietly closed the door. Su Li walked inside and finally saw Chu Lu sitting in front of the zither. When Chu Lu saw Su Li's handsome face, she couldn't help but be surprised. She loosened her hands from the strings and said, It's hard to believe that such an elegant and extraordinary person like you is willing to come to the brothel to play a song for Chu Lu. Su Li sat down with the help of the table and faced Chu Lu. She chuckled and said, "It's hard for me to believe that such a beautiful girl like Chu Lu would give herself up here." Hearing that, Chu Lu's beautiful face was full of sadness. She said, "I'm a good girl, but I was raped by villains. That's my fate. I fought back, but I couldn't defeat them." After hearing that, Su Li smiled more and stroked the invisible air with her right hand. It seemed that she was intoxicated with something. Chu Lu was confused, but Su Li suddenly said, "The heart-melting powder of the Hahuan sect is really powerful. Even I almost let down my vigilance and tell you my origin." As soon as Su Li said that, Chu Lu's face suddenly changed. She looked fierce and didn't have the sadness of a weak girl. She stroked the surface of the zither with one hand and stared at Su Li's face coldly. She said, "Who are you?" Clang, clang, clang. Su Li gently clapped her hands. The strings in Chu Lu's hands were broken and couldn't make any sound. Her weapon was destroyed. Her face was completely pale. The person who came was extremely powerful. She couldn't defeat her at all. "Chu Lu of the Hahuan sect. You are in charge of the intelligence agency in Yunjing City. The Hongyan house is actually under your control. Am I right?" Su Li narrowed her eyes and said faintly. Chu Lu seemed to give up resistance. She sighed and said, "Since you are prepared, why do you ask?" When they were talking, the fragrance in the room was much stronger. Chu Lu stared at the change of Su Li, but she saw that Su Li looked as usual and was not affected at all. How was it possible? Chu Lu was really panicked this time. When did the knockout drug given by the Hahuan sect become so useless? Since I am prepared, how can I not guard against the famous hallucination powder of the Hahuan sect? Su Li stood up and walked to Chu Lu. She said with a smile, "You have been in Yunjing for several years. Why are you still so immature?" Chu Lu took a deep breath and calmed down reluctantly. She said, "Since you're not in a hurry to kill me, you must have something important to discuss with me. Why do you hide it? Just say it." "Miss Chu, you are so bold." Su Li praised and sat down again. She said, "I also know that you joined the Hahuan sect because you had no choice. You were even forced to come to Yunjing City by the sect. The Hongyan powder in your body is warning you all the time that your life is not in your hands, right?" Chu Lu looked dull and said, "It turns out that you are a disciple of the same sect. In this case, why do you test me? I have already accepted my fate." What she said to deceive Su Li just now was false, but the latter half was true. She was still no match for the giant Hahuan sect after all. "No, when did I say that I am the dregs of the Hahuan sect?" Su Li looked disgusted and said, "Miss Chu, don't compare me with those sluts. It is disgusting." "Not from the Hahuan sect?" Chu Lu's dull expression changed a little, and then she was deeply shocked. Su Li was not from the Hahuan sect, but she knew so many secrets of the Hahuan sect. Every sect has moles from other forces. "Miss Chu, you don't need to be surprised." Seeing that she had completely shocked Chu Lu, Su Li finally stopped teasing and said seriously, "I don't know if Miss Chu is interested in making a deal with me." Chu Lu's heart shrank. She knew that it was the main topic. "What deal?" Su Li showed a finger and smiled brightly. She said, "The first one is that I can borrow your intelligence agency in Yunjing City. Correspondingly, I will give you the antidote of the Hongyan powder so that you will no longer be controlled by the Hahuan sect. What about the second one?" Chu Lu was a little excited, but she didn't agree. Chapter 154. You flatter me, young master. I just have some self-awareness. Chu Lu smiled lightly. Even if she used the arrangement of the Hahuan sect in Yunjing City to exchange the antidote of the Hongchuan powder from Su Li, how could she escape from the Hahuan sect with the cultivation of the acquired hurdle? If she really agreed, she would definitely die. The second way of cooperation is that you, Chu Lu, become my woman. Su Li saw Chu Lu's expression change slightly. She couldn't help but smile and said, "Miss Chu, don't get me wrong. I don't have any improper thoughts about you. I want to say that if you are willing to betray the Hahuan sect and join the force I belong to, As long as you do your part, I will definitely let you escape unscathed. Escape unscathed? Chu Lu's eyes flashed with sarcasm. How? And how do I know that I just got out of the wolf's den and into the tiger's mouth? Suli slightly raised her eyebrows and said, Would you rather be shackled by the Hongchan powder all your life and let others control your life than try my proposal? Chu Lu's delicate body shook slightly. She struggled and said with difficulty, Who would like to be a puppet that can't be free in life and death? But you come here strangely. If you don't tell me the reason, I'm afraid that I can't be moved. Suli sat cross-legged in front of Chu Lu and said calmly, In terms of force, the Hahuan sect, which is a 9th-grade sect, is not as powerful as the Hahuan sect. But in terms of the skills of hiding people, the Hahuan sect is not as good as me. Just like this. While speaking, Suli's appearance changed into another ordinary face at a speed visible to the naked eye. If she hadn't changed her clothes, Chu Lu wouldn't have known that they were the same person. You. Chu Lu was shocked. This was a high-level disguise method. If she could master a little bit of it, she could completely change her identity after the Hongchan powder was cured. Even if she stayed in Yunjing City, the people of the Hahuan sect couldn't find her. For a moment, Chu Lu was tempted. Not everyone can learn a high-grade disguise technique to a profound level. I'm sure you're clear about this, Mississippi. However, I still have a secret method that is easier to practice. As long as Miss shows enough value, I will personally return with the disguise method and the antidote for the Hongchan powder. What do you think? Speaking of this, Chu Lu's eyes were fixed and she had made a decision. What do I need to do? Hearing that, Suli finally smiled happily. An hour later, Suli waved a folding fan and left the Hongyan house leisurely. Chu Lu, who was on the second floor, opened the window and watched Suli go away. Her eyes were full of complex feelings. She knew very well that after today, she would dance on the edge of a knife. If she was careless, she would be cut into pieces. Walking out of the alley of brothels, Suli took a deep breath and felt quite relaxed. With Chu Lu as the supervisor, it was much easier for the Linli building to develop. Seeing that it was still early, Suli took a fancy to a clothing store. When she was about to go there, she suddenly heard an old voice coming from the street behind her. Divination, point out the right path. Those who are fated will not take a single cent. Child, you are fated to be mine. Why don't you come and have a divination? Suli's expression changed slightly. Following the voice, she saw a ragged beggar sitting on the ground with his legs crossed. There was a broken bowl in front of him. There were not many copper coins in it. If there was not a piece of cloth next to the broken bowl that said divination, she would have thought it was a beggar. Seeing Suli coming and going, the beggar's eyes suddenly brightened. He immediately continued to say, If the divination doesn't work, it's free. I am proficient in yin and yang and the 5 elements. People call me the 10 divinations and 9 spirits. It's not an exaggeration. Suli shook her head slightly and turned around to leave. For a moment, she felt that the old beggar was a superior. Seeing this, the old beggar was immediately anxious. He immediately used his black chicken claws to calculate in a dignified manner and murmured. Listening carefully, it turned out that he was saying, Heaven and earth, I am the best at fortune-telling in the human world. Maybe it was God's blessing. After the old beggar calculated for less than 3 breaths, it seemed that he really calculated something. His eyes brightened and he shouted, Child, please wait. What I said is true. Your fate is strange. It seems that you have experienced 2 lives. It's extremely strange. Crack. When the second half of the sentence was said, Suli's indifferent face instantly became stiff and she stopped. A random old beggar on the street could tell that she was a reincarnated body. Being shocked, Suli slowly turned around. Her dignified expression disappeared in the blink of an eye and turned into strong interest. She turned around and came to the old beggar. She handed out a note of 100 taels of silver and said with a smile, 2 lives? I have never heard of such a saying. You are a bit interesting as a fortune teller. I happen to have some time today. You can help me to have a divination. When the passers-by saw this scene, they couldn't help but shake their heads. The old beggar was a famous liar in Yunjing City. None of what he said was true. Unexpectedly, someone was fooled. When the old beggar saw the banknote of 100 taels of silver, his two turbid eyes immediately burst out a strong light. Suli didn't see clearly how his two claws moved, and the banknote in her hand was stuffed into his arms. The old beggar loved money so much, Suli felt strange. For a moment, she wondered if the old beggar guessed it. But what he said before was not like a wild guess. The old beggar rubbed his hands and asked Suli to spread out her palm. He took out 3 dirty copper coins from his arms and put them on her palm. Then he put his palms together and muttered some nonsense that Suli couldn't understand. Then he devoutly took the copper coins from Suli's hand one by one. Suli didn't know whether it was an illusion or not. She seemed to feel that the color of the 3 copper coins seemed to be a little darker. The old beggar took the copper coins and threw them into the sky. At the same time, he shouted softly. This time, Suli finally heard what he said. Reincarnation of heaven and earth, the seal appears. Ding, ding, ding. The 3 copper coins seemed to be pulled by an invisible force. They fell to the ground at a very fast speed and made a tinkling sound. Suli's eyes changed and stared at the old beggar. This person really had some real skills. When the copper coins fell, the old beggar stretched his head to look. His face changed greatly, and he spat out a big mouthful of blood. Suli's heart shrank. She thought that the old beggar would say something amazing again. But the old beggar said bitterly, "What a loss. My blood is more than 100 taels." Suli narrowed her eyes and stood up to leave. Seeing that the situation was not good, the old beggar got up and grabbed Suli's ankle. He said repeatedly, "Hey, child, I'm just kidding. I'll explain it for you." Suli stopped and sat down again. The old beggar shook his head and lamented, "People's hearts are not what they used to be. Nowadays, it's really more and more difficult to do business. Child, your sign is clearly the evil of the evil and the evil of the evil. Since ancient times, evil has never prevailed over good. Those who have this sign are bound to have bad luck and a miserable end. But child is not so." The old beggar said with doubts on his face. He pointed to a very inconspicuous broken character on the copper coins. "You should have a doom test 1.5 years ago. You will definitely die. But now you are standing in front of me alive, which is really puzzling. As the saying goes, one who survives a great disaster is bound to have good fortune later. Maybe because of the doom test, child's birth destiny has changed, and there is a trace of vitality in the vast, deathly air." Suli was silent all the time. 1.5 years ago, it was the day when she was reborn. The doom test mostly referred to the death of the previous life. The old beggar's divination was so accurate that it scared her. Speaking of it, this is the second time that I have met a person with this divination. The old beggar seemed to recall an unpleasant memory. He gnashed his teeth and said, "That is the first playboy in Yunjing. I just said a few words, and I was almost killed by him. It's really hateful." Suli's eyes flashed when she heard that. Lingli, his origin was indeed somewhat unclear, and most of the things he taught her were not from the Dahan country. However, even if she went to the spiritual circle, which was a higher level in the previous life, she did not see anything related to Lingli. Lingli's hometown was more distant than the spiritual circle. Thinking of this, Suli smiled and asked, "Old master, I really don't believe your alarmist talk. However, if it is really as you said, how can we solve the problem?" The old beggar coughed slightly and twisted his hands. His meaning was self-evident. Suli stood up slowly. The old beggar panicked again and immediately explained, "Divination is divination, and interpretation of the lots is interpretation. This is the rule. Even if young master is fated to meet me, you should at least give me some compensation, shouldn't you?" Suli was silent for a moment. Finally, she squatted down and took out a banknote. This time it was 1,000 taels. The old beggar's eyes were even brighter. He grabbed the banknote and murmured, "You are much more generous than Lingli." Suli was stunned. Didn't he just say that Lingli didn't believe it? How could he let him interpret the lots? It seemed that the old guy hid something. After the old beggar took the money, he picked up the black copper coin and scraped off the dirt on it with his fingertips. Then he poured it into the inkstone he took out from his arms and ground it to melt completely. Then he took out a writing brush from nowhere and dipped it in the ink. He said to Su Li, "Stretch out your hand. This is my treasure. I didn't even take it out to draw runes for the little bastard of the Ling family." The implication was that he did it for the sake of the silver. Su Li hesitated for a moment and finally reached out her hand, showing her white wrist. The old beggar couldn't help but murmur, "Your wrist is more tender than that of a silly girl." Su Li's face darkened. Before she spoke, she saw the old beggar holding the writing brush and drawing a circle on Su Li's wrist unskillfully. It was extremely ugly and didn't look like a rune at all. The old beggar didn't seem to be satisfied. He muttered to a circle of extremely ugly ink marks for a moment. Then he drew another circle, which merged with the previous black circle and became darker and thicker. Did the old guy deliberately make fun of him? Chapter 155. Whoosh! A stinging pain suddenly rose from her wrist. In Su Li's horrified eyes, the black circle drawn by the old beggar suddenly emitted bursts of white smoke. The black gradually faded, and the white smoke condensed into a strange pattern. It trembled like a living thing, and finally drilled into Su Li's skin through her pores. Su Li only felt that there seemed to be something on her wrist, but this feeling only lasted for a moment and then disappeared. No matter how she probed, she couldn't detect it. After such a change, the black ink on her wrist disappeared out of thin air, as if it had never appeared. "What did you do to me?" Su Li looked at the pedestrians on the street coldly, but she saw that they passed by and didn't look at her. It seemed that the world where she and the old beggar lived was completely separated. She shook her wrist, and the dagger immediately fell into her hand. The tip of the dagger immediately glowed with moon-white light. Seeing this, the old beggar showed an aggrieved expression. "Child, you are so unreasonable. I spent my cultivation to draw a rune for you, but you not only don't shed tears of gratitude, but also fight against me?" This really bitterly disappointed this old man's heart. Whoosh! There was a sound of breaking through the air. Before the old beggar finished his words, Su Li's dagger had been put against his neck, and her voice gradually became cold. "I have never seen such a weird rune. Since you have deceived me into being cursed by this rune, why not tell me the truth and tell me the function of the rune?" The old beggar squinted his turbid eyes and glanced at the glittering dagger. He sighed sadly. "People are really unscrupulous. I don't know you, so how can I hurt you? Although the rune I drew for you can't completely avoid bad luck, it can bring you a glimmer of hope. You put the dagger against my neck, tut-tut." Su Li's expression was slightly relaxed, and she put down the dagger, not because what he said was reasonable, but because she had been cursed by the rune. Even if she killed the old beggar, it would not help. If the rune was really harmful to her, the old beggar should have shown off long ago. She didn't have the ability to isolate the world. This person's cultivation was far higher than hers, but she didn't know why he didn't show it. "I hope you're telling the truth. Otherwise, I won't let go of anyone who harbors ill intentions towards me," Su Li said in a deep voice. The old beggar waved his hand indifferently. Go away, go away. It's not easy for me to tell someone's fortune, but it's full of ungrateful people. Sure enough, the world is fake, and people can't be counted." Su Li frowned. The old beggar said something she didn't understand. She didn't want to ask again, so she turned and left. She had just taken 3 steps when she suddenly felt something strange behind her. She quickly looked back, and her pupils instantly shrank. The old beggar was not on the ground, and even the stall was gone. And she thought, "Su, or is he still here, but I can't see him?" Thinking of this, Su Li's eyes were full of fear. She subconsciously went away. She didn't want to have anything to do with this person. She would forget what happened today, because she was confused for a moment. And of Su of Li of and of the end of today is a good day, hey? Seeing Su Li leave, the old beggar packed up his bedding and left. He held the bank notes tightly in his hand, and a touch of sarcasm flashed through his turbid eyes. He said, "It's not smooth to use a fake thing." At this moment, in the branch of the Leanly building in Yunjing City, Chu Qingning obediently sat in the temporary shed and innocently looked at Fang Yuan and Yin Xuedong next to the table. He looked as if he had constipation and was very embarrassed. "What's going on? If you don't say anything, I'm going to ignore you." Yin Xuedong was slightly annoyed, and her eyes were full of killing intent. Did the fool find another woman in Yunjing City? "Qingning, if you don't tell us, we can't help you either." Fang Yuan frowned and said strangely, "You suddenly stop building the underground addendum. Aren't you afraid that Su Li will blame you?" Since it was convenient for the poisonous heart-biting insect to dig the mountain, the construction of the underground addendum of the Leanly building in Yunjing City was naturally handed over to Chu Qingning. Hearing Fang Yuan's words, Chu Qingning's face became paler. He rubbed his hands and showed a smile that was uglier than crying. "Su Li told us to be careful and not to be discovered by the neighbor. Well, I seemed to accidentally dig through." Yin Xuedong was stunned at first, and then she opened her almond-shaped eyes widely and said, "What did you say?" But Fang Yuan had already rushed to the underground passage. At night, Su Li received the urgent news and rushed to the end of the underground passage. She saw a wall made of black iron suddenly appear in the land. The iron wall should be as smooth as a mirror, but now it was full of potholes as if it had been bitten by a dog. One of the potholes was particularly deep, and it was almost penetrated by a thin film. Through the thin film, Fang Yuan and others could almost feel the light from the other side of the iron wall. Su Li raised her eyebrows and glanced at Chu Qingning, who stood aside like a little wife and didn't speak. She didn't say anything and waved her hand to let everyone return to the temporary shed. That is to say, you were sleeping at that time, and the poisonous heart-biting insect operated on its own. The iron wall suddenly appeared, and it ate it directly as if it were mud and stones. You didn't realize it until it sent a message of indigestion and woke you up? Su Li briefly summarized. Chu Qingning smiled embarrassedly and hid behind Yin Xuedong without a trace. Then he nodded gently. Su Li didn't say anything, but Yin Xuedong was the first to laugh out of anger. "Wow, Chu Qingning, you should sleep late behind our back. Do you know that if this wall is dug through, we are likely to face the anger of 2 inborn seniors?" Chu Qingning shook his body and was full of guilt. He was about to cry. "I didn't mean it. If you meant it, you would have been dead," Su Li said lightly, which scared Chu Qingning instantly. He lowered his head and said dejectedly, "I am willing to accept any punishment." Since Su Li said that the winery next door had an extraordinary origin, we should have thought that they would also build an addendum underground. Yin Xuedong said with some annoyance. She regretted that she didn't remind Chu Qingning in time. They are really rich and overbearing to build a wall with black iron. In the outside world, weapons cast with black iron are hard currency and extremely valuable. Su Li shook her head and explained, "There is another function of black iron. As long as it reaches a certain thickness, it can isolate the psychic awareness of the inborn warriors. Now the wall is useless because of Chu Qingning's torment." Fang Yuan's eyes were slightly fixed. "Does it mean that you can see what is in that addendum?" Su Li glanced at Fang Yuan and said, "The cultivation of those 2 is much higher than mine. If I really explore it with my psychic awareness, they will come to us for tea in the next moment." Fang Yuan was scared after hearing that, and a cold sweat appeared on his forehead instantly. He was about to break through to the inborn realm. He originally wanted to explore it after the breakthrough, but fortunately, Su Li had reminded him earlier. Noticing that Fang Yuan's pneuma was unstable, Su Li was surprised and said, "The movement of breaking through to the inborn realm is too big. Remember to find a desolate place outside the city and let Qingning and Xuedong protect you." Being exposed by Su Li, Fang Yuan's face was slightly red and he felt a little lost. He originally wanted to give her a surprise. Su Li smiled and handed over the AO sword skills. In fact, she didn't have much hope. Unexpectedly, Fang Yuan had a good talent and was about to break through to the inborn realm before the age of 18. It was really a surprise. After laughing, Su Li looked at Chu Qingming and said in a faint tone, "I will fill the iron wall with something. You don't have to worry about it. Chu Qingming, you will not sleep for 3 days and 3 nights to complete the construction of the underground addendum. If there is any mistake, I have a good job. I am worried that no one will do it." Chu Qingming trembled when he heard that. He immediately promised that he would not make any mistake even if he didn't sleep for 7 days and 7 nights. Fang Yuan's heart sank when he heard that. What good job! Chu Qingming didn't do it. It seemed that Su Li didn't want them to do it. Was she going to do it herself? Su Li heard that and smiled gently. She told them to speed up the construction of the Linli building. Then she left in the night. There was a so-called good job. But now Chu Lu was here. Of course, she had to make the best use of her. It was more suitable to let the people in the business do the troublesome work. In the Hongyan house, Chu Lu received the first order from Su Li. She felt strange and said, "How can I follow her? If I follow Su Li, it is reasonable. But Su Zipei, who is she?" In the next few days, an extremely strange scene appeared in a remote winery alley in Yunjing City. There were only 3 to 5 small taverns and inns on this street, but there were 2 shops that were right next to each other. One of them was in a dilapidated state, and its business was bleak, while the other was still busy building a 2-story building. The materials used were all of the best quality, and just looking at the wood alone, it was worth at least 100,000 taels of silver. Is there something wrong with the owner's head? Our business is so bad. Why does he still build a shop here? A woman dressed in a rural dress walked out of the kitchen with a kitchen knife. She looked at the tall building, which was several times higher than their winery, and couldn't help shouting. Not long after, a middle-aged scholar walked out of the front room. He was dressed in a gray robe and had an unkempt beard. He looked like a down-and-out scholar who had failed in his examinations. His skinny figure was in stark contrast to the woman's stocky build. The shabby scholar glanced at the tall building. He cursed with jealousy. What a waste of money. It is better to spend the money. When the strong woman heard that, she immediately walked over and grabbed the shabby scholar's ear. She opened her mouth and shouted, Who are you scolding? Who are you scolding? Do you dislike me for giving too little pocket money? Or do you miss Yin Yin of the Qinghong house? Well, you bastard. You learned to scold the locust indirectly after only a few years of study. It hurts. My wife. I really didn't think about it. Let go, let go. My ear is going to fall off. Chapter 156. Chu Qingning heard the scolding coming from next door and couldn't help but dig his ears. If he didn't see this black iron wall, he would not believe that the extremely vulgar couple would be superior in born seniors. Is this the so-called great seclusion in the world? I admit my inferiority. Chu Qingning sighed. He closed his eyes and continued to control the poisonous heart-biting insect to dig the earth. His pious expression was no less than that of the excavators from Lanxiang. Su Li meditated for a few days and finally finished studying the remaining pages of the secret medicine of the Hahuan sect. When she reached such a realm in the poisoned circle, the so-called secret medicine of the sect was just a lock with a cloud of suspicion. Now she had both the key and the lock, so she could see through it at a glance. It wouldn't take too long to develop the antidote of the Hongshan powder. As for the poison in Tang Lei's body, it would not take effect for a while, and it was not the time to detoxify it. The development of the antidote was not urgent. On this day, in the Su house, Su Li got up early in the morning and hadn't gone out yet. Suddenly, Mammy Li appeared at the door with 2 red invitations, trembling with fear. Miss, something bad has happened. Su Li raised her eyebrows and sat down again. She gave up the idea of going to the affiliated school and took the 2 invitations to open. The first one was from the first prince's residence. The second photo was of the third prince's residence. I have long heard that Miss Su is beautiful and talented. I have admired you for a long time, so I specially set up a banquet in the Hongyan house, Zhuge Lane. Miss Su, please do me a favor and come to meet me at the Su hour of the first day of the 8th lunar month. I will definitely prepare for you. Putting the invitation on the table, Su Li thought for a while. These two invitations, except for the location, seemed to be carved from the same mold. If she really wanted to attend the banquet, she could only choose one of them. The emperor was already old, but the position of crown prince had not yet been established, so the inheritance war was inevitable. The first prince and the third prince were obviously against each other. Both sides were sparing no effort to win over their forces. Standing behind her was the emperor's preceptor Qi Xianqing, who could speak in front of the emperor. Naturally, she was regarded as a delicious cake to win over. "Miss, this is the first prince and the third prince. If we make them unhappy..." Mammy Li was frightened and worried about Su Li. This step was too difficult. No matter who she chose, she would offend someone. But if she chose neither, she would offend both sides. "Nanny, don't worry. I know what I'm doing." Su Li smiled slightly. She was not surprised that she was suddenly in trouble. In the previous life, she heard later that the two princes also competed with each other, but neither of them became the emperor, which was quite ridiculous. Putting down the invitation, Su Li went out as usual and didn't mean to reply to any prince. Mammy Li was full of doubts. She waited anxiously for a day, but no one from the prince's mansion came to question her. It seemed that no one was convinced, and they were sure that Su Li would go there on the first day of August. The hostility between the two princes' residences became more and more obvious. In this strange atmosphere, the first day of August finally arrived. Su Li was dressed in a feather blue embroidered brocade dress. A jasper hairpin was inserted into her black hair bun. Her delicate face was slightly powdered, and she was about to go out. Su Qingtan knocked at the door and came in. When he saw the second sister's dress, his eyes flashed with amazement, but instantly became worried. He asked in a deep voice, "You really don't want me to go with you to the banquet tonight?" He understood that Su Li was invited because of Qi Xianqing. If she refused the prince, it was hard to imagine whether the anger of the former would directly swallow Su Li. He remembered that he was fortunate to have Qi Xianqing as a banner to block countless playboys for Su Li before. He didn't expect that she would be involved in the dangerous battle for the throne. It was really Qi Xianqing's fault and success. Su Li came with a peaceful smile and gently straightened Su Qingtan's slightly uneven clothes. Her gentle voice had a convincing power. "Eldest brother, don't worry. I will have a good sense of propriety. Besides, the decision is not up to me, but up to the master. I believe that as long as I say so, the princes will not embarrass me." Su Qingtan felt a little better. He forced a smile and said, "I hope so. Then I'm leaving. Be careful on the way." Seeing Su Li's carriage leave, Su Qingtan's face was tense. He clenched his fists hidden in his sleeves. He was still too weak. If he had enough power and strength, why did he force his second sister, a 16-year-old girl, to face the oppression of the princes? You can't protect your sister with your current identity. When you think clearly one day, you will understand what I mean. I expect you to take the initiative to come to me instead of passively accepting it. Thinking of Ling Qinglan's words, Su Qingtan gritted his teeth. At this moment, his eyes were extremely firm. In the alley of brothels, the river behind the Hongyan house was sparkling. A well-lit, exquisite ship with several decks was floating on the river. A long wooden board was set up at the bridgehead and extended to the shore. Under the new moon, the breeze was blowing. It was elegant and chic. "Lady Chu, I really owe you a favor today." The first prince, Dongfang Sheng, came early. He booked the entire Hongyan house tonight. But he thought it was inappropriate to entertain a girl in the Hongyan house. Chu Lu came up with the idea of boating on the river and solved the problem for him. Chu Lu covered her face and smiled coquettishly. She said, "Your Highness, you are so polite. It is my duty to share your worries and difficulties. Please don't forget the help of the Hahuan sect after you ascend the throne." Dongfang Sheng's mouth was dry and his throat rolled. He secretly cursed that the women of Hahuan's sect were really vixens, but he still maintained the image of a gentleman and nodded with a smile. "Of course, it is. It's almost time. Miss Chu, please sit down." Then, he pointed to the gauze curtain at the stern. There was a guqin behind the gauze curtain. He would feel much better if there was a gauze curtain. Chu Lu was surprised. The first prince could resist the temptation of the Hahuan powder. She underestimated him. With his patience, he might be able to do it. The task assigned by the sect was completed. Chu Lu quietly dispersed the Hahuan powder. She got up and walked into the gauze curtain. Dongfang Sheng felt much better. He was a little relieved and waited carefully. He didn't know much about the martial arts circle, so he didn't notice the difference just now. In a twinkling of an eye, it was 11 o'clock. No one appeared on the riverbank. Even if Dongfang Sheng had some confidence in the chips in his hand, if Suli didn't come today, how could he perform? For a moment, Dongfang Sheng felt slightly agitated. He couldn't help but loosen the button on his chest and take a breath. But at this moment, on the riverbank full of lanterns, two figures, one in blue and one in white, suddenly appeared. The blue figure was Su Li. Dongfang Sheng was shocked. But when he saw the face of the white figure beside Su Li, his eyes immediately widened. Why did this guy appear here? Ling Li pushed the wheelchair by himself and quickly entered the ship. His speed was even faster than Su Li's. Seeing Dongfang Sheng's dull face, he immediately laughed. He patted Dongfang Sheng's stiff shoulder very warmly and said with a crooked face, "I haven't seen you for a long time. Brother Sheng, you are still elegant as before. As soon as I received your invitation, I immediately dressed up and rushed over without stopping. How about it? My clothes aren't a disgrace to you, right?" Looking at Ling Li's extremely attentive face, Dongfang Sheng's face instantly became darker than the bottom of a pot. He didn't believe that the little bastard who dared to put aphrodisiac in his wine a year ago suddenly became sensible today. He looked down and saw Ling Li's wrinkled clothes. His mouth twitched violently. The little bastard wore the same clothes as him. Looking at Ling Li's wrinkled clothes, the first prince, who was very satisfied with his clothes, suddenly had a feeling of vomiting. This guy really came to undermine him, but he could only bite the bullet today. Because he did give the invitation to the Ling family. At this moment, Su Li had already walked to the ship. Looking at Ling Li, who was complacent, and the first prince, who was angry, she couldn't help but feel strange. Why did he also come back? Seeing Su Li coming in, the first prince was confused. Dongfang Sheng instantly felt that his face was ruthlessly pulled off by Ling Li and rubbed on the ground. But at this moment, he still had to keep a smile and bear his anger. He said to Su Li, "It's my honor that Miss Su is willing to come here. Please sit for a moment and let me deal with the unexpected situation." Su Li showed a considerate smile and nodded slightly. "First prince, it's very convenient." Then she really sat aside and watched the play. Dongfang Sheng was relieved. He was really afraid that Su Li would be annoyed by Ling Li and leave directly. In that case, his impression in front of his father would be worse than that of the third brother. It should be known that a slight difference could lead to a great difference. Suddenly, Dongfang Sheng felt his body turn cold, as if a terrifying chill had locked onto him, causing him to tremble uncontrollably. But this feeling came and went quickly. He didn't find a source at all. Dongfang Sheng glanced at Ling Li, who was still giggling. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. For a moment, he thought that the source was Ling Li. Today, he was really confused because of anger. Even if the sun rose from the west, it couldn't be this little bastard. Ho ho! Dongfang Sheng sat next to Ling Li's wheelchair. He suppressed his anger and said with a smile, "Brother Ling Li, I remember that the invitation was clearly written to your cousin, Ling Qinglan. Why did you come?" "Yes." Ling Li took it for granted and replied without hesitation, "Brother Sheng, you and third brother Lang should discuss the date and send invitations to my cousin at the same time. Qinglan is too busy to attend to other things." "How can he be busy?" "Qinglan went to the banquet of third brother Lang. I am afraid that you will be unhappy, so I come here." "I am afraid that you will be unhappy." Unhappy. When Su Li heard this, she almost burst into laughter. She probably understood. Ling Qinglan belonged to the third prince's faction on the surface. The third prince sent an invitation to Ling Qinglan to discuss important matters. Dongfang Sheng wanted to make trouble, so he deliberately sent an invitation to Ling Qinglan at the same time. The third prince was also angry. He gave Ling Qinglan a taste of his own medicine and also sent an invitation to her. Originally, Ling Qinglan went to the third prince's place, and she came to the first prince's place. It seemed that they tied. But Dongfang Sheng forgot that there was a master in the Ling family who didn't know the rules. Chapter 157. Clang. The sound of the zither resolved the awkwardness of the confrontation between the two people. Lingli followed the sound and saw Chu Lu looming in the gauze curtain. His eyes brightened. He said, "Oh, isn't this Miss Chu? I only saw Brother Sheng and Miss Su Li just now. I didn't notice that Miss Chu was on the boat. It's my fault." Chu Lu smiled sweetly. Her sweet voice came through the gauze curtain. "Today, I am just a maid playing the zither. Child Ling, don't worry about it. First Prince, the dishes are getting cold. Let's start the banquet first." After being reminded by Chu Lu, Dongfang Sheng suddenly recovered from his anger. He almost forgot that Su Li was still waiting. Dongfang Sheng calmed down and sat down. He said, "Come on, sir, the banquet. Since Brother Ling is here, how can I refuse to entertain you?" Immediately, a servant came to the boat and added a banquet table. Ling Li moved the wheelchair to the banquet table. Suddenly, he looked at Su Li, who was sitting on the side, and said with a smile, "Oh, isn't this Miss Su Li, the first talented girl in Yunjing City? Miss Su is really a natural beauty, just like, yes, a fairy descending to the world. Compared with Wu Xiuxiu and other vulgar girls, you're much more beautiful." These words and Ling Li's surprised expression were really funny. Su Li couldn't help giggling. She had never seen Ling Li act like this. Dongfang Sheng was very angry. In his opinion, Su Li was too young to be deceived. She was actually amused by Ling Li. It was he who invited Su Li to talk business, but it became a place for Ling Li to flirt. It made him feel that he was cheated on, but he had no one to complain. Ling Li, Dongfang Sheng couldn't bear it anymore. He shouted loudly, and the whole ship was immediately quiet. Ling Li sneered in his heart, but he pretended to be confused and said, "Brother Sheng, you can call me if you need something. Why do you shout so loudly? It's not good to disturb Miss Su Li." Dongfang Sheng's heart was burning with anger, but he resisted the urge to curse out loud. He put on a fake smile and said, "Brother Ling, your body is suffering from some damage, so you should eat more and talk less. I happen to have something to ask Miss Su Li." "Hi." Ling Li patted the handle of the wheelchair and said, "Brother Sheng, you should have told me earlier. I will stay silent. You can talk, you can talk." Then, Ling Li actually started to eat and drink without caring about anything else. Dongfang Sheng breathed a sigh of relief. There was sweat on his forehead. After he wiped it without a trace, he smiled and praised loudly. "Miss Su, you have been famous since the day you entered Yunjing City. Today I can see you. You are really worthy of your reputation. I have no regrets today when I see you." Su Li smiled and showed her white teeth. She opened her red lips and said, "First Prince, you are so polite. I know I don't deserve such a great reputation. But my master is too famous. I just benefited from him. Sigh, you can't say that." Dongfang Sheng waved his hand and said, "As the saying goes, a great teacher produces a great disciple. The Lord of the Emperor's preceptor can assist my father to ascend the throne. He must have something extraordinary. I have admired the Lord of the Emperor's preceptor for a long time. I wonder if Miss Su Li can introduce him to me?" Well, Su Li looked embarrassed. When Dongfang Sheng saw that there was hope, he tried harder to persuade Su Li. Suddenly, a vulgar voice suddenly came in with the momentum of a sudden clap of thunder. "D sure? I know. Isn't she the most popular girl in the Hongzue building? I remember clearly that I was going to buy her that day. I didn't expect that you got her before me. I was disappointed for a long time." Ling Li held the chicken leg in his right hand and said with a greasy smile. Dongfang Sheng's heart skipped a beat. He looked back and saw that Su Li's face became extremely ugly at a speed visible to the naked eye. No one would feel happy when his master was insulted like this. The sudden disturbance made Dongfang Sheng so angry that he wanted to stab the arrogant and disabled teenager to death. He rushed to Ling Li's table and finally held back his killing intent. He overturned the banquet table with one hand and said angrily, "Ling Li, I respect you. Don't go too far. Ling Li tilted his head and picked his ears. He looked sloppy and disdainfully said, Brother Sheng, what are you doing? I'm just telling the truth. Why are you angry with me? If my staying here makes you unhappy, you can just ask me to leave. Why do you have to pretend to treat me to wine and meat? How hypocritical. You. Dongfang Sheng stared and his hands trembled with anger. He underestimated Ling Li's shamelessness. Ling Li was more than shameless. He didn't even know what shame was. It's really unlucky for the Ling family to have a grandson like you. Dongfang Sheng scolded in a roundabout way, but Ling Li nodded calmly and said, I'm flattered. If there's nothing else, I'm leaving. I don't want you to say that I go too far. Then, Ling Li turned his wheelchair to leave the ship and went to the shore as if nothing had happened. Dongfang Sheng was so angry that he almost spat out blood. He just wanted to strangle this little bastard. Su Li looked cold, but she still maintained the etiquette. She bowed slightly and said, It's late. First Prince, you'd better go back to the mansion to have a rest. I can't decide the master's affairs. If the master comes to Yunjing one day, I will tell him. I'm leaving now. Please wait. The First Prince opened his mouth, but he couldn't say a word in the end. He had completely lost his calm because of Ling Li's disturbance. His mind was in a mess. How could he deal with Su Li's sudden departure calmly? Ling Li, Ling Qinglan, I'm not done with you. Dongfang Sheng roared angrily, but he didn't notice that Su Li and Ling Li disappeared on the shore almost at the same time. Chu Lu came out from behind the gauze curtain and ordered people to clean up the mess of the ship. Then she walked to the First Prince and said softly, Your Highness, you are impulsive. Dongfang Sheng exhaled heavily and sighed. Ling Li, the little bastard, went too far. I made a fool of myself in front of Su Li. It's really abominable. Chu Lu was disappointed when she heard that and said, Your Highness, don't you think that Ling Li's sudden appearance tonight may not be a coincidence, but someone deliberately instructed him? Dongfang Sheng was slightly shocked, and his eyes changed. He looked back at Chu Lu and said, You mean Ling Qinglan? Chu Lu spat out 3 words, which immediately made Dongfang Sheng's face pale. Ling Li is an idiot. Of course, he doesn't have such a brain. However, if Ling Qinglan instructed him to make trouble and disturb her dinner with Su Li, it makes sense. It is the nature of a playboy to pester endlessly. Even if Ling Qinglan didn't deliberately teach him, Ling Li could also play well. Maybe Ling Li is not an idiot as people think. The more Chu Lu said, the gloomier Dongfang Sheng was. Ling Li was a playboy even before his legs were disabled. It was impossible for him to hide his nature when he was in his mother's womb. So, it must be Ling Qinglan who instructed him. Your Highness, please rest assured. Although Su Li refused your kindness, she didn't say anything. She still has a chance. Our Hahuan sect will try our best to help you. It's not a big deal for the Third Prince. Chu Lu comforted him. The First Prince was a little relieved. He made a fist and palm salute and said, Thank you, Lady Chu. You people in Jianghu pay attention to the code of brotherhood. I can't be an exception. If there is anything I can help, just tell me. Chu Lu's beautiful eyes lit up, but her worry soon faded. She said with a smile, Your Highness, thank you for your kindness. The Hahuan sect has no difficulty for the time being. If there is any difficulty, I will help you. That's good. Ha. They talked happily, but Chu Lu sighed in her heart. She wanted to find a way out from the First Prince. But Dongfang Sheng's performance today made her understand that she only had one choice. At least, Mr. Li didn't seem to be as reckless and stupid as the First Prince. The river was rippling. The night in the Hanyan house was quiet and peaceful. Under the river, Su Li, who went away and came back, leaned under the boat in black tights. She heard every word of the conversation between Chu Lu and the First Prince. It turned out that the Hahuan sect was behind Dongfang Sheng. Su Li's eyes flashed. Chu Lu still hid something from her. Although they just cooperated, it was normal for Chu Lu to do so, but it didn't mean that she wouldn't blame her after she knew it. Between the First Prince and the Third Prince, Su Li chose the First Prince without any hesitation. It didn't mean that she thought highly of the First Prince. It was because the Hongyan house was an ordinary place for others. But she knew it was the stronghold of the Hahuan sect. As for the third prince, he had something to do with Ling Li's force. With Ling Qinglan's mediation, she didn't need to waste time. Thud, thud, thud. There was a sound of footsteps on the boat. It was the sound of Chu Lu and the first prince leaving one after another. Only a few manservants were still cleaning up on the boat. Suli listened quietly for a moment. When she noticed that the first prince's secret guards retreated, she immediately floated up quietly and was about to leave. All of a sudden, the lake was tumbling. Before Suli emerged from the water, she saw a familiar and handsome face in the dim lake not far from her. Suli opened her eyes slightly and showed a surprised expression. Ling Li, he actually went back and hid under the boat to eavesdrop. Maybe both of them were vigilant enough. They were afraid that the guards of the inborn realm around Dongfang Sheng would notice, so they didn't spread out their psychic awareness to investigate. They deliberately controlled the flow of the lake. The position where they eavesdropped was only a few inches away, and no one was near them. Ling Li was also shocked. He looked at Suli. He didn't expect that Suli would come back and do the same thing as him. She had no reason to do so. Gurgle. Maybe they were too close to each other. Suli breathed slightly. A bubble came out of the water and made a light sound. Chapter 158. Slap. On the shore at night, Suli slapped Ling Li indifferently. She didn't say anything and just took a deep look at his lips. Then she turned around and walked away. Her whole body was steaming like a fairy. She evaporated the river water in a few steps. She was no different from usual. Ling Li rubbed his cheeks and stroked his bitten lips with his fingertips. He stared at the beautiful figure in the distance with his starry eyes. From her violently heaving chest, he could see that she was not as indifferent and calm as she looked. That time in the yard in the valley, when she detoxified the poison for him, she took the initiative to kiss him. This time, he just wanted to cover his movement. But she bit his lips and slapped him hard. Why? There was a burning pain on his cheeks. Ling Li ran his vital energy to fade the red mark. The wound on his lips also scabbed. He turned around and went in the opposite direction instead of chasing Suli. The night wind blew. Hierarch Ling's cold face flashed a slight smile. It seemed that he was slapped, but he was not angry. Instead, he was very happy. When Suli returned to the Su house, Su Qingtan saw that she was tired. He stopped asking and let her have a good rest. Mammy Li had already boiled a whole bathtub of hot water and waited for Suli to come back. Suli took off her clothes and lay in the bathtub lazily. She closed her eyes and took a long breath. The scene under the river flashed in front of her eyes from time to time. She could still feel the touch on her lips. What a disappointment. Suli sighed and got rid of the distractions in her mind. She made up her mind that she would never have anything to do with him in this life. She carefully avoided any possibility of meeting Ling Li, but she couldn't bear the fact that he took the initiative to see her. And she couldn't bear the strange coincidence. Mammy Li picked up the dirty clothes outside the screen. She felt strange when she held them in her hands. Why did the clothes seem to have just been washed? They were a little wrinkled. At the same time, in the Ling house, Ling Mo and Ling Xian stood aside quietly. Their eyes were focused on Ling Li's lips. Why did the master hurt his lips when he went to the banquet? What are you looking at? Even if Ling Li was calm enough, he couldn't bear being stared at by them for a quarter of an hour. He couldn't help but look up and said, "What are you looking at? Hurry up and reorganize the first prince's files." Ling Mo quickly became serious. He walked to the side and burned the outdated files. He said, "I didn't expect that Chu Lu of the Hongyan house was a member of the Hahuan sect, and she was with the first prince. If that's the case, we'll have to reevaluate the first prince's influence." A voice came from outside the door. The door of the study was opened. It was Ling Qinglan, who just came from the third prince. When Ling Qinglan entered the room, he saw the wound on Ling Li's lips and was shocked. "Your mouth? It's all because of your stupid idea." Ling Li stood up directly from the wheelchair. He pointed at Ling Qinglan's nose and scolded, "If you didn't ask me to pretend to be crazy to find Dongfang Sheng, I wouldn't have been scolded by that boor." He overturned my banquet table, and I had to keep smiling. Although he didn't make it clear, Ling Li's words clearly meant that the first prince turned over the table and caused the injury on his lips. Pooh! Ling Mo couldn't hold back his laughter. Ling Xian covered her mouth and didn't laugh. Ling Qingluan also couldn't help laughing and ridiculed. Isn't it your strength to pretend to be crazy and silly? I made the best use of you. If you didn't endure humiliation, we couldn't get such important information. Ling Li looked at Ling Mo and said faintly, now immediately, run 100 laps around the drill ground. Don't use your genuine qi. Ling Mo immediately smiled bitterly and said, why only me? It was destined that no one would answer this question. He glanced at Ling Xian, who secretly gave him a gesture of encouragement, and then glanced at Ling Qingluan, who was full of encouragement. Finally, he went out of the study dejectedly. As soon as Ling Mo left, the three of them were relieved. Ling Xian and Ling Qingluan secretly thought that the master finally vented his anger. Poor Ling Mo. A certain someone thought to himself, I finally muddled my way through. About Dongfang Lang? Ling Li sat down again and calmed down. Ling Qingluan smiled slightly and said, of course it's smooth. I think Dongfang Lang will praise this plan and trust me more tomorrow. After all, I've even used my own cousin this time. Ling Li's face darkened. Since Ling Qingluan joined them, Ling Qingluan had made fun of him a lot. But this time, Ling Qingluan even schemed against Su Li. Su Li was not a person who didn't take revenge. Ling Qingluan's life was still in her hands. Ling Qingluan would regret in the future. Ling Li laughed in his heart, but didn't show any clue on the surface. After they talked for a while, Ling Qingluan left. Nothing happened that night. The next day, the sky was dark, and it seemed that it was going to rain heavily. There were few pedestrians on the street. Few people were willing to go out in this weather. Mammy Li thoughtfully prepared an umbrella for Su Li. Su Li took it and was about to go out. Su Zipei came in from the door and said, second sister, father said that the restaurant is not busy today. He wants you to see the boiler. Su Zipei seemed to be afraid of Su Qingtan's lesson. She didn't make trouble for Su Li for several days. She stayed at home and only went out to buy medicine for her mother. Today was not the day to buy medicine for Zhu Yan. Su Li's eyes dimmed. She pretended to be surprised and said, father said that I don't need to go to the restaurant. Why? Su Zipei was a little flustered. She forced herself to calm down and said, how do I know? That's what father said. I'm going to take care of my mother. With that, Su Zipei turned around and ran into the courtyard. It was obvious that she was running for her life. Su Li pondered for a moment and sat in the carriage. Under the coachman's inquiring eyes, she smiled sweetly and said, go to the Byway building. After an hour and a half, the carriage stopped in front of the Byway building. The business was not as poor as Su Zipei said. On rainy days, many people had nothing to do, so more people came to enjoy delicious food. Su Wanli was very busy. When he suddenly saw Su Li, he didn't doubt her. He immediately pulled her and told her quickly, you come just in time. Several boilers are not working well. Go and have a look. Su Wanli nodded. Su Li was stunned. Did Su Zipei really come to the Byway building in the morning? Could it be that she had been overly sensitive recently and was overthinking things? Being pushed into the kitchen, Su Li saw several boilers were overused. She quickly called several helpers to start refurbishing them. At this moment, Master Ma Ling sneaked into the building with a few henchmen. They glanced around and didn't see Su Li. They immediately breathed a sigh of relief and found an empty seat to sit down. Give me a plate of the signature dishes of your inn. I'm not short of money. Ma Ling stretched out his hand and slapped an ingot of silver on the table. The waiter immediately went to the kitchen to serve them. Master, I heard that the dishes of the Byway building are delicious. Do we really? One of the henchmen leaned over and whispered. He couldn't help but swallow his saliva. Ma Ling immediately knocked him on the head and scolded in a low voice, useless thing. As long as this thing is done, we can all get rid of the affiliated school and become real students of the National Academy. That is the talent of the National Academy. It is impossible for him to lie. The henchman shrank his neck. It seemed that he was attracted by the prospect that Ma Ling said and no longer refuted. But before that, let me taste the taste of the beggar's chicken. I won't be able to eat this dish in the future. Ma Ling smiled and didn't eat immediately. He waited until all the dishes were served. After eating and drinking, he secretly took out a white sandalwood and lit it. Then he put it under the table. Today's wind happened to blow into the restaurant. In the snickering of Ma Ling and others, the colorless and odorless smoke floated all over the Byway building. At this moment, Su Li, who was repairing the boiler in the kitchen, didn't notice it at all. After a while, there was a burst of wailing in the restaurant. "Ah, my stomach hurts. What's the matter? I feel dizzy." Plop. A fat man who had eaten many plates of the beggar's chicken suddenly foamed at the mouth. He slid down the chair and lay on the ground, twitching violently. Others were shocked. "Don't eat. There is something wrong with today's dishes." Ah, the whole Byway building was suddenly in chaos. More and more people fell down and foamed at the mouth. Some people staggered to the street. Finally, they turned their eyes and lay directly on the road. This strange scene immediately attracted the attention of the passers-by outside. In less than 10 breaths of time, a large group of people had gathered around. Seeing that the situation was not good, the waiters finally shouted in panic, "Master! Master, it's not good. All the guests are vomiting." Su Huanli looked at the guests lying on the ground. At this moment, his mind was blank. The Byway building had been open for several months. How could it suddenly become like this? Hearing the noise, Su Li immediately put down her work and rushed to the front hall. Seeing such a tragic scene, she couldn't help but shrink her pupils. She swept to the front of the nearest person who fell down. She put her hand on the pulse and felt a little numb. He was poisoned, and it was highly toxic. There were so many people. The antidote she brought was not enough at all. "Father, it's not too late. Immediately send them to the clinic for detoxification. Otherwise, we can't afford to bear the responsibility if they all die," Su Li said hurriedly. She had rushed to the side of several people with the most severe symptoms of poisoning. She took out several silver needles she carried with her to suppress the toxins. Su Huanli was at a loss at this moment. Hearing Su Li's words, he immediately ordered the waiters to go to the clinic to call people. The waiters realized that the Byway building was in a big trouble. If all these people died in the restaurant, they couldn't escape the blame. Hearing Su Huanli's order, they immediately pushed away the wall of onlookers and ran wildly. Fortunately, the location of the Byway building was excellent. It was not far from the clinic. Soon, the waiters got a large group of people from the clinic to help. Su Li breathed a sigh of relief. Suddenly, she glimpsed a person who fell beside the door of the Byway building. Her pupils shrank violently. She crossed the distance in 2 or 3 steps and came to the person. Seeing the person's face, Su Li narrowed her eyes and various thoughts passed through her mind. This was Ma Ling, the only son of the minister of the Ministry of Revenue. Chapter 159. Such a big accident happened in the Byway building. Fan Dekang, the officer of the Ministry of the capital city, responded very quickly. He immediately sent people to block the Byway building. But when Fan Dekang saw Ma Ling and a group of rich disciples who followed him died in the shop, he turned around and ran away without saying anything. The son of the minister of the Ministry of Revenue was dead, and so were the eldest sons of the rich and powerful families. It was a hot potato. If he didn't do it well, he would lose his official position. It was a big matter. He couldn't manage it. Ling Qinglan of the Supreme Judiciary and Chun Gong of the Ministry of Penalty were not afraid of trouble. He was old, and it was better not to get involved. "Lord, don't go. I'm wronged." Seeing that Fan Dekang just came and left, Su Huanli didn't have time to say a word. He hurriedly chased after him, but was stopped by the officer of the Ministry of Penalty. Under the attack of the officer of the Ministry of Penalty, he couldn't act rashly. He could only raise his hands in panic and slowly retreat. Su Li stood aside with light in her eyes. She didn't check the cause of death of Ma Ling and others. It was meaningless. All the money of Ma Ling and others disappeared. It was obvious that someone erased all the traces under the guise of theft. It was difficult to find out anything. Soon, the people of the Supreme Judiciary and the Ministry of Penalty arrived. Fan Dekhang was very tactful. He didn't want to offend anyone. At the same time, he sent the news to the people of both sides. Ling Qinglan and Chun Gong met in front of the Byway building. Their expressions remained unchanged, but their eyes changed. The atmosphere suddenly became tense. The Supreme Judiciary and the Ministry of Penalty were in charge of major cases. They competed fiercely and had a bad relationship. Ling Qinglan sighed in his heart and immediately said with a smile, "Lord Chun, you are busy with old cases. How about handing over the case of the Byway building to me?" Chun Gong said with a cold face and an indifferent voice, "The Ministry of Penalty will deal with this matter. You, the Supreme Judiciary, should avoid arousing suspicion." Ling Qinglan's smile slowly disappeared. This old guy really didn't give him any face. Su Qingtan, why are all the recent major cases related to you?" Thinking of this, he took a step back and bowed to salute. He said loudly, "Lord Chun, there must be injustice in this case. Please don't punish them, lest they make a big mistake." Chun Gong snorted and stepped into the Byway building without looking back. Ling Qinglan waved his hand and motioned them to go back. His confidant behind him couldn't help but transmit the sound in silence. "Lord, are we just going to leave like this?" Ling Qinglan raised his eyebrows and said, "Otherwise, this is related to Su Qingtan. Even if I snatch the case from Chun Gong and find out the real murderer, I will not be able to convince the public. I've already said what I need to say. The rest is up to the Su family's luck." While talking, Su Li's delicate figure flashed in Ling Qinglan's mind. He couldn't help but click his tongue. He only hoped that the girl could hold on. The means of the Ministry of Penalty were not easy. Su Li was not surprised to see Chun Gong come in. It would be strange if the Supreme Judiciary could receive this case. Chun Gong bent down to check the corpses of Ma Ling and others. Then he stood up and glanced at Su Huanli and other waiters who were so scared that they almost wet their pants. Finally, his eyes stayed on Su Li for a moment, and he said coldly, "Take all the people of the Byway building into custody and send them to the Ministry of Penalty for interrogation. Take all the corpses away and hand them over to the coroner to find out the cause of death. Block the Byway building. No irrelevant person is allowed to approach during the investigation period." The Ministry of Penalty immediately took action after the cold orders were given. The business of the building diagonally across the street finally improved. Wu Xiuxiu stood in front of the windowsill on the second floor and watched the people of the Ministry of Penalty leave with Su Li and others. She couldn't help but doubt. "Brother, it's Chun Gong." Wu Jin smiled slightly and played with the unburned sandalwood in his hand. He said, "Without this thing, who can think that Ma Ling and others poisoned themselves? They are also the culprits of poisoning the Byway building. Even if Chun Gong is resourceful and can trace it to me, he can't arrest the descendants of the Wu family without evidence." Then, Wu Jin gently folded the half-burned sandalwood in his hand and instantly pinched it into powder. Wu Xiuxiu looked at her arrogant and high-spirited brother. Her eyes flashed with obsession. If she was not her brother's sister, how good it would be in the prison of the Ministry of Penalty. All the people of the Byway building were detained separately, including the waiters. Su Li was in a mixed women's cell, in which more than a dozen female prisoners in dirty white prison uniforms were locked up. Seeing that a newcomer came in and hadn't changed into a prisoner's uniform, several female prisoners' eyes immediately lit up and they rushed to Su Li crazily. These people had been locked up for a long time and were delirious. They were all crazy. Su Li frowned and dodged. She slightly slapped away several female prisoners who went too far and touched their wounds. They screamed and finally came to their senses. They shrank in the corner again and looked at Su Li with fear and undisguised hatred. "I didn't expect that you are a martial artist. Little girl, do you know what it means to expose your cultivation in the Ministry of Penalty?" The gray-haired old woman squatting in the innermost room sneered. Her voice was as harsh as a night owl. Ha ha ha. The rest of the female prisoners immediately laughed with the old woman. Suli slightly pursed her thin lips and gradually narrowed her eyes. In her previous life, she was imprisoned in the water dungeon of the Ministry of Penalty for a year. How could she know the fate of warriors in the Ministry of Penalty? However, even if she didn't expose her cultivation, her identity had already been known in Yunjing City. How could the disciple of the royal preceptor have no cultivation? Suddenly, there were 2 footsteps in the cold dungeon. Although the conversation was light, Suli still heard it clearly. Hey, hey, hey. After a slightly perverted laugh, he said, I haven't seen a virgin being tortured for a long time. This is a good job. Lao Wu, why don't you give this job to me? Bullshit. I have been waiting for this moment for 10 years. You want to exchange with me? Go away. Su Li's eyes gradually became cold. She was careless. After all, Yunjing was Yunjing. She knew that someone would deal with her, but when it really happened, she couldn't think of a way to deal with it. Although the Ministry of Penalty was heavily guarded, it was absolutely easy for her to escape if she wanted to. But she couldn't escape. If she escaped, the sin of the byway building would definitely be put on her head. Her eldest brother would also be implicated by her, and his career would be ruined. She had such regrets in her previous life. In this life, she absolutely didn't want to see it. Who is Suli? Come out to be interrogated. While she was thinking, 2 jailers who specialized in execution appeared in front of the dungeon with their eyes shining. Suli was arrested by the Ministry of Penalty. Seeing the news from Ling Qinglan, Ling Li's expression changed slightly. Ling Xian was also worried. If the woman died in the Ministry of Penalty, no one could save Ling Qinglan's injury. Why don't I go there? Ling Mo was nervous. He knew the relationship between the master and Suli. It was absolutely not as estranged as it seemed. No. Ling Li reached out to turn the switch on the wall. He took out a set of casual clothes and a mask and turned away. He said, Your figure has been exposed last time. Just in case, I will go in person. Ling Xian watched Ling Li leave in a daze. Was Master's nervousness the same as hers? Ling Mo glanced at her cautiously and didn't dare to say more. The 3 people in the room had their own thoughts. Ling Qinglan was the most confused. Who was Su Li to Ling Li? Why was everyone nervous when they heard that Su Li had an accident? Was there any secret that he didn't know? Ling Qinglan thought for a few years. He patted the fan in his hand and became serious. Finally, he didn't ask more questions. With his broken body, he could live for at most half a year. What would he do if he knew it? Back to the Supreme Judiciary, Ling Qinglan entered the study and saw Su Qingtan, who seemed to have been waiting for him for a long time. Lord, how are my sister and others? Su Qingtan clenched his fists. He had heard it from people who came back, but he still wanted to get confirmation from Ling Qinglan. Ling Qinglan raised his eyebrows and said lightly, It's not a big deal to be imprisoned by the Ministry of Penalty. After all, the matter has not been investigated. Your father will be fine, but your sister may be. Hearing the second half of the sentence, Su Qingtan's heart seemed to be twisted fiercely. He felt suffocated and said, My second sister. What will happen to her? Ling Qinglan smiled and said, It seems that you are not surprised that Qi Xianqing is your sister's master. You should have seen Qi Xianqing, so you should know that Qi Xianqing is not a simple royal preceptor. He is also a powerful man who has reached the peak of the inborn realm. Do you think that he will not teach his disciple Xinggong? Su Qingtan's pupils shrank slightly. You mean, but the second sister never showed any martial arts in front of him. She didn't look like a person who knew Xinggong at all. Ling Qinglan sneered unabashedly. Su Li's cultivation has reached the acquired 8th hurdle. As her elder brother, your cultivation is not as good as her. Tut tut. Su Qingtan's face turned red because he was humiliated. He growled, Don't say it. Ling Qinglan was not angry. He knocked on the table with his fingers and said, But in the future, after your sister suffers the punishment of piercing the bones, you still have many chances to surpass her. Piercing the bones. Su Qingtan's face turned pale. He stepped forward and grasped the edge of the table tightly. He roared, Why does she have to be pierced the bones? Isn't she not convicted? Does the Ministry of Penalty dare to punish the disciple of the royal preceptor? If you have time to be angry with me, why don't you go to your idol to have a try? Ling Qinglan stopped smiling. There was a strong pressure out of nowhere, which made Su Qingtan feel that he was facing the world. He said, "Unfortunately, the rule that warriors have to be pierced the bones when they enter the Ministry of Penalty is set by Lord Gong, whom you worship." Su Qingtan held his breath. When he thought that his second sister, who had suffered a lot since childhood, finally had a few happy days, she had to suffer inhumane punishment. He was so distressed that he trembled all over. Why wasn't he the one who was punished? Taking a deep breath, Su Qingtan's eyes became gloomy. He said, "Ling Qinglan, last time you said that there was a way to make me stronger quickly. No matter what the price is, I promise you." Chapter 160. Ima Cult? It sounded familiar. Su Qingtan frowned and thought for a moment. Suddenly, he was shocked. Wasn't it the Yinma cult that the Dahan dynasty had been afraid of and wanted to exterminate? Ling Qinglan turned out to be a member of the Yinma cult. At the same time, he was the minister of the supreme judiciary. Su Qingtan felt a sense of trembling in his heart. How many people wanted Ling Qinglan, who had a clean background, to be a high official in the Dahan dynasty? Not to mention anything else. The supreme judiciary must have been infiltrated by Ling Qinglan a lot, and he would become one of them today. Suddenly, Su Qingtan felt that his shoulder was patted. His uncertain eyes suddenly focused, and he returned to his own situation. Ling Qinglan's smile was as elegant as usual. But today, in Su Qingtan's eyes, it was evil. Don't panic. The Yinma cult is not as terrible as you think. The Dahan dynasty is afraid of it and deliberately vilifies it. In recent years, we have been the scapegoat for the Dongfang family a lot. Then why is it still called the Yinma cult? Su Qingtan stared at Ling Qinglan. If he didn't agree today, he would not leave the study. It was better to inquire more about the Yinma cult, pretend to join it, and then wait for the opportunity. Ling Qinglan's slender fingers tapped the table gently. The crisp sound fell into Su Qingtan's ears. It seemed that his heart was gently grasped. Every tap made his heart beat strangely, and his blood flow was not smooth. Su Qingtan groaned and knelt on the ground. At this time, Ling Qinglan's voice sounded. "Su Qingtan, in the future, you will be a member of the Yinma cult, and I will be your master. Don't talk to me in this tone. Do you know? I will ask Ling Shui to teach you later. Since it's your first offense, I will spare you this time." His fingers loosened, and the voice disappeared. Su Qingtan breathed a sigh of relief and collapsed on the ground like a dog. Ling Qinglan, who used to be a strict but good teacher in his eyes, had already become a very terrible, evil figure. As for the Yinma cult, the hierarch didn't want to establish it. But there is karma. Since people call it evil, then it is evil. The so-called decent is just a gold brick that those sanctimonious hypocrites put on their faces. It is not rare. It seemed that Ling Qinglan explained clearly, but it seemed that he didn't explain anything. Su Qingtan was silent for a while. Ling Qinglan asked him whether he joined the cult or not, but he got a lot of doctrines. It turned out that Ling Qinglan said Yinma cult. He had become a member of the Yinma cult and had no right to choose. For the sake of our friendship in the past, I will personally teach you Xian Shi as a way to fulfill my promise to you. However, if I'm not satisfied with your cultivation progress, I'll personally cripple you so that I won't lose face. After saying that, he extended his hand and threw out a rubbing booklet. This is a superior Xiangong. I don't ask you to understand much when you go back, but remember to memorize it and burn it. I don't need to say more about the preciousness of Xiangong, right? Looking at the booklet lying quietly on the ground, Su Qingtan took a deep breath and suppressed the throbbing in his eyes. After he entered Yunjing, he knew that Xiangong was not taught to outsiders. What he learned in the Supreme Judiciary was just the most common third-rate Xiangong. If he didn't learn from his family, he had no chance to learn those advanced Xiangong. Now, the superior Xiangong that he had been dreaming of was in front of him, but he couldn't feel any joy in his heart. Instead, he was deeply confused. He didn't know whether it was right or wrong to do so. Su Qingtan picked up the booklet and stood up. He hesitated for a moment and ended the meeting in the way of the supreme judiciary. "I'll leave first." Seeing Su Qingtan leave, Ling Qinglan's eyes became cold and apologetic in the blink of an eye. The middle-aged guard beside him, who had been like a sculpture, finally came to life. He gestured to Ling Qinglan that he didn't need to do this. Ling Qinglan smiled and said, "Is it too much? The more I go too far now, the guiltier he will be after I leave. That guilt can firmly restrain him and let him stay in the Yinma cult to take over my position. Moreover, I don't have time to explain. It's better to let him obediently accept everything I arrange." The middle-aged guard was stunned. He shook his head and gestured again. "You didn't tell the hierarch about it, but you acted on your own. At that time, that mess will be left to Ling Li to clean up. I don't care so much." Ling Qinglan patted the paper fan and stood up. He looked calm and said, "Let's go and continue to try the case. After that, I can continue to investigate the matter of the Yi family." On the way to the dungeon, the chains of the shackles clanked when they touched the ground. Su Li looked down at the ground. In the impatient words of the two jailers, she walked more and more slowly. The smell of blood was getting stronger and stronger. "Didn't you eat? Go faster. If the emperor breaks the law, he will be punished the same as the common people. What's more, you are just a common person with an undeserved reputation. Do you think that someone will come to save you?" Su Li was suddenly pushed by the jailer. She staggered out. The shackles on her feet were too short. Finally, she failed to stabilize her body and lay on the ground. The tip of her nose and arms were rubbed with blood. "Ha ha 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 ha. What acquired eighth hurdle? You're still the same. You are so weak." The two jailers gloated and laughed. Her pupils were gloomy, and she slowly got up. Although the shackles were made of black iron and could trap any warrior below the peak of the acquired realm, they couldn't trap her. The shackles under her feet were as fragile as tofu for her. They would be broken if she exerted a little strength, but she couldn't do that. If she did that, it would be equal to announcing to the world that she had already been a senior of the inborn realm. In that case, the things in the Qinghe town would be unexplainable and there would be more troubles. Su Li frowned when she stood up and walked 2 steps. She finally arrived at the torture chamber. The two jailers walked in with Su Li. Suddenly, they saw a person sitting on the table next to the torture instruments. They were shocked and immediately went forward. "Lord, why are you here?" Chen Gong glanced at Su Li, who was covered with bruises. He was expressionless. He turned to the two jailers who came over and slapped them. Clap, clap. The two jailers turned 3 times and fell to the ground with great force. They spat out 2 or 3 teeth, and their mouths were full of blood. But they were not angry. Instead, they were all frightened. They didn't have time to pick up their teeth. They got up and crawled to Chen Gong and kowtowed again and again. "I know I'm wrong. I know I'm wrong." They didn't know what they had done wrong. But countless previous examples told them that what they should do now was to kneel down and kowtow to apologize in front of the temperamental Chen Gong. Chen Gong took off the key rings from their waists, stretched out his legs, and kicked them away. He said coldly, "Get out." The two jailers felt that they were pardoned. They immediately got up and left the torture chamber. One of them lamented in his heart. He should have thought of it. Of course, Lord Chen liked to do such a good job by himself. He was asking for trouble. Only Chen Gong and Su Li were left in the torture room. Seeing that Su Li bowed her head and didn't speak, Chen Gong looked a little relaxed. He pulled Su Li in front of him and bent down to untie the handcuffs and ankle cuffs for her. Then he took out a jailer's clothes and put them in front of Su Li. "Put them on and follow me." Su Li took over the clothes and was stunned. Although Chen Gong had saved her before, it didn't mean that she had a deep relationship with Chen Gong. She never thought that Chen Gong would play favoritism for her. But how could she explain the scene in front of her? Chen Gong put the shackles back to the original position and said without looking back, "Put them on quickly. The dungeon is humid. Let's go out first." Putting on the jailer's clothes and the official hat, Su Li lowered her head. Chen Gong nodded and covered her eyebrows and eyes with the official hat. In this way, no one in the Ministry of Penalty would think that she was a criminal if she followed him. Even if Su Li went out with him openly, no one dared to stop her. So, Chen Gong chose a milder way. Pushing open the dungeon door, Chen Gong walked up as usual. Su Li followed him and passed by an inconspicuous jailer. She suddenly felt something strange and looked back, only to see the figure disappear at the entrance of the dungeon. Who was that? She should have no acquaintance in the Ministry of Penalty. Don't look around. Follow me. Hearing Chen Gong's order, Su Li could only suppress her doubts and followed him to a quiet room. Pushing the door and entering, Su Li smelled rotten. It was a morgue. At a glance, Su Li saw Ma Ling and others alone. Why did Chen Gong bring her here? Obviously, the people in the room had been cleared out by Chen Gong in advance. He took Su Li to Ma Ling's body and said, "You are the apprentice of Qi Xianqing. You must have extraordinary insight in medical circle. The coroner of the Ministry of Penalty is an ordinary person after all. He can't be compared with the martial arts circle. Can you check and see if you can find anything?" Su Li hesitated and said, "I am a sinner. How can I?" Chen Gong raised his eyebrows and said in a low voice, "Just check. Don't talk so much nonsense." Su Li seemed to be scared and hurriedly went to Ma Ling's body to check. Seeing that she quickly got into the mood, Chen Gong praised her in his heart. She deserved to be the apprentice of the miracle-working doctor. He found a chair and sat down. Looking at Su Li's charming back, even the jailer's clothes couldn't hide her lovely temperament. He was gradually in a trance. He used to hate and be crazy. He vented all his resentment on the prisoners. Then, he got the name of a cruel official. Others said that he was ruthless and didn't recognize his relatives when he handled a case. Whether he was right or wrong, he would punish him first. But it was obvious that Su Li took the blame for someone else. He had been an official for many years. How could he not even see this clue? What's more, for Su Li, who was not much different from his daughter, he couldn't do it. "Shengjun, it should be right for me to do this." Thinking of his wife's voice and smile, Chen Gong had all kinds of complex thoughts in his heart. Finally, he sighed deeply. The empty torture room. The jailer, who looked like a teenager, was so fast that he seemed to be divided into several shadows. He quickly checked all the scaffolds. There is no new blood. Ling Li's eyes flashed. That was to say, Su Li was not tortured, but he searched the whole cell and found no trace of Su Li. Su Li, where is she taken? Pulling the brim of the hat, Ling Li suddenly remembered the gaze staring at him from behind before he came in. That was Su Li. Su Li didn't hide her pneuma. As long as he paid a little attention, he could detect her. At that time, he was concerned about the dungeon and ignored it. Now he was sure that it was Su Li. Su Li changed into the jailer's clothes and was taken away by Chen Gong. Chen Gong saved her before. Ling Li frowned slightly. Was there any relationship between them that he didn't know? Chapter 161. After an hour, Su Li finally checked the death of Ma Ling and the other 4 people. "Lord Chun, the cause of death of Ma Ling and the other 4 people is the same. They were all poisoned. I may need to go back to the affiliated school to do a test. But one thing is clear. The poison in their bodies is different from that of the guests in the restaurant. It is a more sophisticated mixed poison. A mixed poison different from that of the guests in the restaurant?" Chen Gong raised his eyebrows slightly. Finally, he heard a key point that was different from what the coroner said. "Yes." Su Li took off her gloves and came at Chen Gong. She said carefully, "When I helped others to suppress the poison in the restaurant that day, I found that the poison was fierce but not immediately fatal. But Ma Ling and the other 4 people were poisoned by the throat-sealing poison. There was no time to rescue them. That is to say, someone wanted them to die immediately. Dead people tell no tales." Chen Gong's eyes flickered. What was the reason that Ma Ling and the other 4 people were killed immediately without saying a word? Ma Ling was not a small figure. He was the only son of the minister of the Ministry of Revenue. If he was not famous and adhered to the rules, Ma Weiming would have come to the Ministry of Penalty and asked him to punish the Su family immediately. However, Chen Gong heard that Ma Weiming had told the matter to the emperor. If he didn't hurry to find out the truth, Su Li would be in danger. People thought that the emperor and the royal preceptor were as close as father and son. But only Gong knew that the relationship between the emperor and the royal preceptor was not harmonious. On the contrary, the emperor was only afraid of Qi Xianqing. Otherwise, how could Qi Xianqing not stay in Yinjing? He clearly knew that if he appeared, the emperor would be stimulated. But why did he frequently send disciples to Yunjing? This was the only thing he was confused about. Lord Chun, Suli called him. Gong came to his sense and got rid of distractions. He said, "In this case, I will accompany you to the affiliated school. However, if the behind-the-scenes manipulator is really prepared, I am afraid that the affiliated school—" "Lord Chun, don't worry. The affiliated school will be fine. But my current identity—" Suli glanced at her nondescript clothes helplessly. A rare smile appeared on Gong's face. He took out a good-quality disguise pill and said, "You could be my assistant for the time being and help me solve the case." Suli was surprised. The grade of disguise elixir given by Gong was not low. At least, it could hide from the eyes of warriors below the inborn realm. The value of this elixir was very high. "Lord Chun, there's no need for that." Suli ran the secret method, and her face changed into another person. "My master taught me the secret method of disguise, and now it comes in handy." This time, it was Gong's turn to be stunned. Qi Xianqing must have taught her that the secret method of disguise could not be easily shown to others. Did she trust him so much? For a moment, Gong's thoughts became more complicated. When Ling Li came back, Ling Mo saw that there was no one behind him, so he felt strange. Could it be that even the master couldn't enter the Ministry of Penalty now? "Young master," before Ling Mo asked, Ling Li waved his hand and interrupted him. He changed his clothes and sat back in the wheelchair. He rubbed his chin and said strangely, "Ling Mo, what do you think can move Gong's heart?" Ling Mo was slightly stunned. He didn't understand why the master suddenly asked this, but he still replied, "Probably not. Do you remember that Gong's uncle committed a crime a few years ago? Gong was cold-hearted and didn't show any mercy. He tortured Gong to death and confessed. After this incident, Gong truly became a loner. All of his relatives refused to contact him even if they died. Even family affection couldn't move him. Is there anything else that can surpass family affection? What you said is reasonable, so it is more strange." Ling Li rubbed his lips with his fingers and said, "Why did Gong only treat Suli differently and even violate his own principles to rescue her from the dungeon?" Hearing this, Ling Mo and Ling Xian were both shocked. If Ling Li didn't say it himself, they even thought that someone was joking. Ling Xian's eyes flashed with wisdom, and she said softly, "Young master, Gong's past has always been vague. No one knows what he experienced in the past to become like this. Maybe he doesn't want to mention it. But even the Tianya house can't find it. It is unreasonable. It is very likely that Suli really has a secret relationship with Gong. Suli seems to have a clean background, but all kinds of signs show that her background is not simple. Young master, when you contact with her, you should be careful." Ling Li frowned, and a light flashed in his eyes. He ordered in a low voice, "Use the spies of the Ministry of Penalty to investigate all the cases related to the Qin Palace. Since the Supreme Judiciary can't be found, the Ministry of Penalty is his territory. He should leave some clues." Ling Xian was shocked and said repeatedly, "Young master, it is not easy to cultivate spies. Once exposed, it is easy to alert the enemy. Just for Gong, it is really—" Ling Xian. Ling Mo suddenly interrupted her with a cold voice. Ling Xian's face changed slightly, and her heart thumped. She immediately looked up and saw a frosty face. She felt more bitter in her heart. She didn't realize it and violated the taboo of the young master. "Xian, how many years have you been with me?" Ling Li said lightly, which made Ling Xian panic. She bowed her head and said obediently, "Young master, you picked me up when you were 7 years old. It has been 10 years. 10 years. Haven't you learned the rules of staying with me?" Ling Xian's eyes were full of tears when she heard Ling Li's increasingly severe tone. She said aggrievedly, "I know I am wrong. I'm also worried about you. I accidentally. Please punish me, young master. Ling Li looked indifferent. He closed his eyes and waved his hand. The punishment is the same as before. Go out. Ling Xian was slightly happy and immediately went out of the study. As long as she could get the forgiveness of the young master, she was willing to run 1,000 or 10,000 laps, let alone 100 laps. Except for Ling Li, there was only Ling Mo in the room. Ling Mo glanced at Ling Xian, who was running crazily on the martial arts field. He couldn't help but be speechless. He turned back and said, "Young master, I am afraid that Ling Xian." Ling Li looked a little annoyed. Ling Mo immediately swallowed the second half of the sentence. Ling Li closed the file, and a trace of tiredness flashed through his eyebrows. He said, "Why did she do that? The Ling Mansion is a dangerous place. Second brother and I both know it. We won't let any woman suffer after entering the Ling Mansion. Even if you, young master." Ling Mo stood straight, and his eyes were as firm as a rock. He said, "I am the sword in the hand of the young master. Where I am, the sword is. If the man died, the sword would die." The second half of the sentence sounded in his heart. His life was given by the young master. If the young master died, he would definitely follow the young master without any hesitation. Seeing Ling Mo like this, Ling Li was even more worried. All of them were like this. If they were all like Su Li, avoiding him as if he was a plague, he would worry a lot less. No, that was not good. When he thought of Su Li's face, which was full of smiles to everyone but him, he couldn't help but hate her. Did he owe her in his previous life? Even if he was a playboy, his appearance was not ugly. His family was a super rich and powerful family in Yunjing. Why did she hate him so much? It was just a kiss forced by the situation. Did she have to slap him so hard? Looking at the uncertain expression of the young master, Ling Mo consciously retreated and closed the door. It was better to stay away from the young master in this state. In the affiliated school of the National Academy. Without Su Li, the affiliated school was not as lively as imagined. Ma Ling was also the top playboy in Yunjing. Now he suddenly died. Everyone was in danger. Many young masters hid at home and didn't dare to go out. Gong pushed the door and walked in with Su Li. He saw a fat man sitting in the school and staring blankly at the teacher's desk. Gong didn't expect that someone dared to stay here. He couldn't help but be stunned. Then he was more surprised when he saw the face of the latter. The first master of the Tang family, Tang Lei, was known to be weak. He was one of the 3 useless people in Yunjing. It seemed that he was not as timid and weak as the rumor said. Su Li was surprised when she saw him. Today, Tang Lei was completely different from the liveliness on the first day. There were 2 dark eye sockets on his round face. He exuded the lethargy of an old man. He was dying. When Gong approached, he also noticed that Tang Lei was in a bad state. He immediately became serious. Tang Lei heard the noise and looked at the door. When he saw that it was Gong, his joy immediately turned into panic. He didn't expect that he waited here for 3 days. Instead of Su Li, the most terrible person in Yunjing City came. "Lord Chun, I'm Tang Tang Tang." Tang Lei stammered for a long time, but he didn't say his name. He was so anxious that he almost cried, I'm going." Then he was about to rush past Gong. But Gong grabbed his back collar and said sternly, "Stop. You can't go anywhere today." Tang Lei was very flustered. When he thought of the inhumane means of Gong in the rumor, he was so scared that he almost cried. Gong shook his head again and again. The rumor was true. No wonder that person called him a rotten wall that can't hold up the mud. He slowed down and asked, "I won't catch you. What are you doing here? Tell me the truth." Tang Lei was caught by Gong, but he couldn't escape. He could only accept his fate and said obediently, "I come here because to find Lecturer Su. I want to ask her if there is any more of the medicine she gave me." "What?" Tang Lei sighed and said weakly, "The medicine that Lecturer Su gave me made me suffer a lot, but it's not a big deal. But after a while, I felt heavier. Especially recently, I could sleep very well. But my eye sockets were dark. It seemed that I didn't sleep at all. I was so scared. After thinking about it, I could only come here to find Lecturer Su." Gong was slightly moved. He turned to look at Suli beside him, but Suli looked more serious than him. She said, "What unusual things have you eaten recently? Or where have you been?" Tang Lei was extremely gentle. Although Suli dressed like a jailer, he didn't feel insulted when she asked him. Instead, he thought about it seriously and murmured, "I haven't been anywhere." Brotherly's been fascinated by lecturer Su recently. He always said that he would study at home to increase his talent. "I have no place to go, so I stay at home. But I seem to eat more than before." Su Li's eyes flashed. She grabbed Tang Lei's fat wrist. A green light that couldn't be detected by people of the inborn realm flowed into Tang Lei's body along the tendons and vessels. Ouch! Tang Lei immediately squatted down, holding his belly, and farted several times. Ignoring Chen Gong, he immediately ran to the latrine pit. Chen Gong frowned and waved his hand to disperse the stench. It was not like, but a rotten smell of a corpse. "Suli, what's wrong with him? What did you give him before?" Suli didn't hide it. She told Chen Gong what she found when she met Tang Lei for the first time. Chen Gong frowned. In this way, someone wanted to kill Tang Lei secretly. But Su Li's means seemed to alarm him, so he accelerated the speed of killing Tang Lei. Chapter 162. After waiting for a long time, they saw Tang Lei walk over with a weak face, clutching his stomach. Although his face was pale, the dark circles under his eyes had obviously faded, and the death chi on his body had dissipated a lot. At least, he didn't look like he was about to die. Gong was surprised. He only saw Su Li feel Tang Lei's pulse without using other means, but she could make Tang Lei get better quickly. Her medical attainments were not much worse than Qi Xianqing's. No wonder Qi Xianqing would accept her as his last disciple. Su Li stretched out her hand to Tang Lei again. Tang Lei showed a look of fear. His fat body trembled, but he still stretched out his wrist. The feeling just now reminded him of Su Li and made him understand that the little jailer in front of him would not hurt him. This time, Su Li took away her hand after feeling the pulse and said, "It's okay for the time being. Don't eat 3 meals a day at home. Even if you want to drink water, you have to go outside. Isn't Ling Li your good brother? Why don't you ask him for help? You'd better live in the Ling house." Tang Lei understood the meaning of Su Li's words and stood still with a dull face. After a long time, he came to his senses. With a deep sense of loss in his eyes, he murmured, "I don't fight for anything. Why do I still?" Chen Gong narrowed his eyes and transmitted the sound to Su Li. "Are you sure about detoxification? There are enough materials in the mansion. If Lord Chen is willing to wait, we can cure him today. But the person who poisoned him hasn't appeared yet. Even if I detoxify him, I can't guarantee that he won't be poisoned again. Then let's do it." Chen Gong transmitted his voice and waved at Tang Lei. "You come with us." Tang Lei also found that Chen Gong was not as terrible as he had imagined. He nodded and followed them into the inner hall of the affiliated school. Seeing that they didn't stop, he wanted to say something but stopped several times. Finally, he couldn't help saying, "Lord Chun, this is Lecturer Su's place. It's not good for us to do this." It turned out that the guy didn't realize that the little jailer was Su Li after he had a big diarrhea just now. "Don't ask what you shouldn't ask." Chen Gong's voice was so cold that Tang Lei was so scared that he didn't dare to say anything. Su Li shook her head slightly. Tang Lei's brain was also affected by taking poison all year round. He became stupid. She didn't know who hated him so much that they wanted to torture him to death in this way. The three of them came to the study in the back hall. Chen Gong and Tang Lei were immediately shocked by the cleanliness of the back hall. "Does Lecturer Su live here?" Tang Lei was stunned. An empty house. Not only did Su Li's writing paper, but also the whole bookshelf disappeared. There was no furniture in the whole room. The floor was so clean that it could be seen as a mirror. Obviously, it had been very carefully cleaned. Chen Gong looked dignified. From this, he could see that his opponent was terrifyingly cunning and would not be easy to deal with. Su Li walked in and walked to the wall where the desk was originally placed. She tapped the stone bricks in a strange way, and the solid stone bricks gradually became loose. Suli grasped the right time and moved quickly to the right. The ground of the whole house rumbled. Slowly, the floor in the middle of the room moved away, revealing a stone staircase leading downwards. Suli looked calm. No matter how many times she saw the ingenuity of the mechanism of the Tianhe country, she would be amazed. Gong and Tang Lei were even more surprised. Gong's eyes were full of horror. He recognized the origin of the mechanism and asked, "Is this left by your master?" "No." Suli shook her head and said, "This is a gift from my senior fellow apprentice." Her cultivation was not high enough to find the dark iron addendum. The senior fellow apprentice that she had never met was obviously not only a master of medical circle, but also had a talent in the mechanism that ordinary people could not reach. One day, when she read the notes left by the senior fellow apprentice, she used the words of the Ghost Valley meditation direction to unravel the secret of the tunnel. It could be seen that the senior fellow apprentice was meticulous. Senior fellow apprentice, a figure of a cold-faced young man, flashed in Gong's mind. His origin was much more mysterious than Suli's. He had never revealed his real name. He only let those playboys call him Lecturer Yu. When the three of them walked down the stone staircase, the mechanism above their heads was gradually closed. The walls on both sides immediately lit up automatically, illuminating the stone room. This stone room was much larger than the study on the ground. It almost covered the entire underground space of the affiliated school. It was hard for Suli to imagine how the senior fellow apprentice solved the underground stone soil, which was not much softer than the dark iron. Bypassing several stone pillars, Gong and Tang Lei followed Suli to a place with a layout similar to that of the pharmacy. The walls were full of medicine cabinets, and there was an old ladder next to it. It seemed that it had not been used for a long time. There were messy bottles and jars on the huge medicine table. The smell of medicine mixed together and became very strange, but it made Tang Lei feel very comfortable. It seemed that his weakness also disappeared a little. "Lord Chun," Suli called him. Gong immediately took out a porcelain bottle, which contained the poisonous stomach lump from Ma Ling's body. After Suli took it, she threw it into a transparent container, sealed it, and threw it aside. Then she turned around and put the medicinal materials in the bamboo basket on the medicine cabinet one by one. She said, "Lord Chun, I need 4 hours to refine the antidote. Why don't you stroll around? Senior fellow apprentice left me a lot of strange books. They are on the bookshelf on the left. It is very interesting to read." After saying that, Suli turned the switch and entered the deeper alchemy room. Seeing the colorless container filled with Ma Ling's stomach lump became colorful and colorful, Gong twitched his mouth. He walked to the bookshelf and took down a book. Then he really read it quietly. Only Tang Lei was dumbfounded and didn't know what to do. What antidote? Looking at the smile of Lord Gong, he had an illusion that he was in a dream. In the spacious alchemy room, the stone door made a dull sound and was closed slowly. The light was not dim. It could be seen that the shelves on the wall were full of bottles and jars. There were also many yellow phials. It was obvious that they were more precious than those outside. The smile on Suli's face disappeared, and she became indifferent when she was alone. She ignited the high-quality charcoal and waited for the temperature to gradually rise. Then she was lost in deep thought. It was not difficult to guess the planner behind this matter. Without the Baiwei building and Suli in Yunjing City, the one who benefited the most was not the playboys, but Wu Xiuxiu of the Wu family. After such a long time, the owner behind the Baiwei building was not a secret in the upper circle. How could she not know who it was? But it was one thing to think of it, and another thing to find evidence to prove it. Gong must show convincing evidence to clear the suspicion of the Baiwei building and make it a victim from the perpetrator. The Wu family was always ruthless. Suli could imagine that they had destroyed all the things removed from the ground of the affiliated school, and most of the things that disappeared from Ma Ling's body had been destroyed. Thinking of this, Suli frowned tightly. There was no way now. It seemed that she had to make plans after she tested the poison. Time ticked by. Perhaps Tang Lei felt bored, so he moved close to Gong and began to read. The content of the ancient book was so marvelous that Tang Lei was shocked. His inexperienced look made Chun Gong laugh in a low voice again and again. Gradually, Tang Lei's fear of Chun Gong weakened. They talked about what happened recently, and Tang Lei knew that something big happened in the Baiwei building. "Lord, what did you say? Ma Ling and others are all dead." Tang Lei was shocked. He lowered his head and murmured, "Someone dares to kill Ma Ling? It shouldn't be. I met him that day. He was happy and said." "What did he say?" Chun Gong put away the ancient book, and his eyes were clear. He didn't expect that Tang Lei had contact with Ma Ling that day. "Ma Ling and others usually like to bully me and show off everything to me." Tang Lei shrank his neck and said in a panic, "Although I hate them, I never want to kill them. Lord Chun, I didn't kill them." Chun Gong was so angry that he laughed. "I know it's not you. What did they say that day? If Tang Lei could kill people, the sun would rise from the west." Tang Lei breathed a sigh of relief. He was really afraid that Chun Gong would misunderstand and directly take him to the Ministry of Penalty. He stared at Chun Gong and recalled carefully. Suddenly, his eyes brightened and he said happily, "I remember. Ma Ling said that he would soon become a formal student of the National Academy and then get rid of the identity of the affiliated school. He also asked me if I want to go with them." "What?" Chun Gong immediately felt strange. With Ma Ling's talent and learning, it was impossible for him to enter the National Academy. Even if his father dared to bribe the National Academy blatantly, it was impossible. Under the feet of the emperor, the National Academy was the most unbearable. How could Ma Weiming dare to be unlucky? So who promised him that Ma Ling would go to the National Academy? Ma Ling was not a fool. The person who gave him the guarantee must have a high status. He deceived Ma Ling with a good reason and let Ma Ling do something. Thinking of this, Chun Gong suddenly felt numb and terrified. If Ma Ling really poisoned him, how could he investigate it? How did Ma Ling poison him? Seeing Chun Gong suddenly showing such a terrible expression, Tang Lei couldn't help but step back in fear. Suddenly, there was a sound of the stone door behind him. He was so scared that he fell to the ground. Then he looked back and saw Su Li coming out of the alchemy room. A fragrance of elixirs filled the air. Su Li glanced at Chun Gong, who was lost in thought, and didn't disturb him. She walked to Tang Lei and handed a bottle of elixirs. She whispered, "Take one elixir every 3 days. You can recover after 21 days. But your appearance will not change in case of alerting the enemy. Go to the Ling house and live there. Tell your good brother exactly what I said. Only in this way can you save your life. Do you understand?" Tang Lei nodded quickly and put away the elixirs confusedly. He didn't understand, so he could only remember that sentence and tell it to Brother Ling later. But one thing was clear. The little jailer was not a bad person. Her expression when she told him carefully was exactly the same as his dead mother's concern when she died. Chapter 163. Tang Lei said what he just said to Su Li again. Then Tang Lei felt cold all over. The little jailer in front of him seemed to exude a more terrible momentum than Chun Gong. But the momentum disappeared in an instant, as if it was an illusion. Back to the desk, Su Li picked up the glass bottle and looked at the black, transparent liquid. She squinted her eyes and said gently, "Tang Lei, you can go. Remember what I said." Tang Lei quickly stuffed the elixir bottle into his chest and thanked Su Li honestly. Then he walked to the ground and looked back 3 times. When he walked to the stone door, Tang Lei found that he didn't know how to open the door. Suddenly, the stone door moved automatically, revealing a dazzling light. He was so scared that he almost jumped up. After he calmed down, Tang Lei walked along the stone stairs to the empty room and immediately ran to the Ling mansion. When Chun Gong came back to his senses, it was already an hour after Tang Lei left. Chun Gong was fascinated to see Su Li standing in front of the table, which was not much shorter than her. She poured jars of things into the small black glass bottles attentively. How many years had this girl lived? It was rare that she could quickly calm down in such a disaster and was not affected at all. "Ching Jun, if you could also leave me a memory, how good it would be." The old-fashioned and serious man's eyes were filled with sadness. The sadness in his heart had never been interrupted in the past 13 years. After a while, his mind calmed down. His lips were tight and pale, and tenderness flashed in his eyes. Soon, give me a little more time to find the murderer and avenge you. Then I will come down to accompany you. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Brotherly, brotherly. The fat man ran on the stone road of the Ling mansion and rushed to Ling Li's knees. Ling Mo, who stood behind him with his hands down, twitched his mouth. It was a familiar scene. Ling Li lazily picked his ears, but there was a trace of seriousness in his eyes. He asked, "Fat man, what's wrong with your face? Are you dying of looking for too many women recently?" "Oh, Brother Li, don't mention it. That little jailer said that he could only save his life by looking for you," Tang Lei said, and then told Ling Li everything he saw today. Ling Li was the closest person to him, except his mother. He never kept anything from Ling Li. Did Gong Chun and the little jailer go to the affiliated school? That little jailer even gave you pills and told you to come find me? Ling Li's eyes flashed. It was obvious that the little jailer was Su Li, and it seemed that Chun Gong treated Su Li well. Chun Gong took her with him all the time. She was very safe. Ling Li curled his lips slightly, squinted his eyes, and said, "What did she ask you to tell me?" Tang Lei immediately said it word for word. Ling Li and Ling Mo were slightly shocked. It was clear that someone tried to kill Tang Lei. He had been with Tang Lei all the time, but he didn't find it. "Brotherly, can you let me stay here? I was really scared some time ago. I hid in the affiliated school for 3 days and didn't dare to go home. I didn't see Su Li. I really thought that I was going to die in the affiliated school." Wow. Thinking of these days' grievances and the fright he suffered in the affiliated school today, Tang Lei finally burst into tears. His nose was running, and the last bit of seriousness in Ling Li's heart disappeared. Since the fatty could recover in more than 20 days, Ling Li didn't need to worry. But it was Su Li's turn to save Ling Li's brother. What was this? He could almost imagine how Su Li would mock him when they met next time. Thinking of this, Ling Li was so angry. Fatty Tang was not so fat and stupid when he was a child. Why didn't he notice it? "Brother Li, say something if it's a deal or not." Tang Lei wailed. Ling Li came to his sense and immediately showed an impatient look. He waved his hand and said, "I asked you to come to live here. Why didn't you come? How could your cruel parents treat you as a human? There are many guest rooms in my yard. You can choose one at will, but there are no maids in my yard. Don't think it's troublesome." Tang Lei was immediately overjoyed. He held Ling Li's hands with his 2 pig trotters and said gratefully, "You are really a good brother. I knew Brother Li is the best. I don't need maids. There are no maids at home. I'm used to it." Ling Li pretended to be disgusted and let go of his hands. But he sighed in his heart that Tang Lei lived a miserable life as the first young master of Prime Minister Tang's mansion. After Tang Lei left happily, Ling Li looked cold. He said, "All kinds of monsters dare to jump around in Yunjing. Do you really think that I don't exist? Send someone to check whether the poison in Tang Lei's body is related to the martial arts circle. Also, how is the background of the Chun Gong investigated?" Ling Mo handed over the file and whispered, "A spy of the Ministry of Penalty was lost. They can't start again recently." Ling Li squinted his long and narrow eyes and said, "Bury him well and send someone to take care of his family." Then he opened the file and said, "Bury him well. It's all arranged." Ling Mo responded in a calm tone, and then he retreated to silence. The file was very long with tens of thousands of words, but Ling Li read it in less than half an hour with his eyesight. He threw it to Ling Mo and said, "You also read it and tell me your opinion." Ling Mo took it and read it carefully. His eyes suddenly changed. This Chun Gong's origin was very clear. He was a native of Yunjing. His family had lived in Yunjing for generations. He had no distant relatives. Just this point alone could dissociate him from the relationship with Su Li. The next one shocked Ling Mo greatly. Chun Gong got married at the age of 19. His wife, Wang Qingjun, was from Yunjing. The investigation of the Tianya house clearly showed that Chun Gong had never married in his life. There was such a big discrepancy in the file recorded by the Ministry of Penalty. The couple had been married for 3 years, but they didn't have a child. Ling Mo could imagine that Chun Gong was prominent in the Ministry of Penalty at that time. He was busy all day. Maybe his wife felt neglected and divorced. Ling Mo continued to read. On August 15th, 235 years ago, his wife, Wang Changjun, died. Qin Gong's temperament changed greatly. In the following 13 years, he worked hard in the case of the Ministry of Penalty and became a pillar of the Dahan country. The Mid-Autumn Festival Lantern Night, 13 years ago. Ling Mo's hands trembled slightly, and he was shocked. Was there such a coincidence in the world? Ling Qinghua, no. The whole Yi family of EMO was also exterminated that night. The murders on the same day might be related. If the two cases could be investigated together, the real murderer might be found immediately. But why did the imperial court choose to conceal the case of Chun Gong and let the massacre of the Yi family become an unsolved case? For a moment, Ling Mo felt creepy, as if he had touched the dark facts that couldn't be stated. Ling Li smiled lightly. If we could get it earlier, Qingwan wouldn't have been wandering around like a headless fly in the past few years. But it's not too late now. Xian, what day is it today? Ling Mo coughed and said, Ling Xian went out to do something. Didn't you order her to do so? Today is the 6th day of the Chinese New Year. Ling Li suddenly understood. He clapped his hands and stood up. I forgot about it. Ling Mo, since she is not here, you stay and drink with me today. I haven't cooked for a long time. You have to accompany me. Yes, master. Ling Mo answered with a bitter face. He used to think that the master was the most perfect person in the world. He reached the inborn realm at a young age and was a young hierarch. His mental state was beyond the inborn realm, and his fighting power was unparalleled. He was good at all kinds of arts and crafts, and was also good at zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting. He knew a little about the medical circle and the poison circle, until he ate the dishes made by the master. After a while, black smoke came out of the kitchen. Ling Li tasted the dishes he made and sighed deeply. Since God had allowed him to transmigrate to this world, why didn't he get rid of his bad habit of cooking? Alas, he hadn't eaten the authentic hometown dishes for a long time. Ling Mo was still trying to deal with the scorched, dark dishes and cried silently. Alas, at this time, he really wanted to eat the dishes made by Miss Su Li. At this moment, the two men unexpectedly missed the simple dishes on the table in the valley of the Desu town. While eating, Ling Li suddenly said, Ling Mo, after the 15th day of the Chinese New Year, the autumn hunting will start soon, right? Yes, master. Ling Mo answered, and his face became serious. Ling Li leaned back on the rattan chair and closed his eyes. He rubbed his eyebrows. If he could straighten his clothes and straighten his hair, he would be a beautiful picture. Dongfang Hu, the old guy, comes out from the imperial palace. Even if there are seniors with him, the bad guys hiding in Yunjing will come out to test him. Send someone to keep an eye on him. It is a good opportunity. If we can take the opportunity to eliminate some strong opponents, it will be better. Speaking of this, Ling Li suddenly opened his eyes and said, I must get the full moon. In the underground addendum of the affiliated school, Su Li breathed a long sigh of relief and began to clean all the bottles and cans. Qin Gong noticed the movement and knew that the poison test had finished. What's the result? He came over and asked. Su Li's eyes flashed, and she replied, the poisons in Master Ma Ling's body are extremely complicated. There are 3 kinds of poisons. The toxicity of the 3 poisons is not very strong, but when they're mixed together, it becomes a deadly poison. 3 kinds. Qin Gong was shocked. How could Ma Ling be poisoned by so many poisons? He was poisoned by 3 kinds of poisons in a day. The only explanation was that the murderer's attainments in the circle of poison were equally powerful and the control of poisons was excellent. He could understand the first 2 kinds of poisons. After all, the beggar's chicken of the Byway building was poisoned. Later, Ma Ling poisoned the Byway building. But where did the last one come from? If it was really the 3rd kind of poison that Ma Ling ate according to the murder behind the scenes, then how could he investigate it? For a moment, Qin Gong didn't know where to start. Suli stood aside and said nothing. She had an important discovery that she didn't mention to Qingong. The mixture of 3 poisons was fatal. Chapter 164. Qingong and Suli left the affiliated school of the National Academy with a sad face. At this moment, it was late. There were few pedestrians on the dim street. Qingong and Suli walked to the Ministry of Penalty one after the other. Suddenly, behind Suli, there was a third person's feet. This person's footsteps landed on the ground silently. He appeared abruptly like a ghost. Qingong, who walked in the front, was still immersed in thought and didn't notice that there was one more person in the team. The passers-by thought that the 3 people knew each other and didn't notice anything wrong. Suli's eyes under the brim of the hat flashed. Her well-behaved look revealed a bit of joy and blame. She was happy that Feng Yuan, who came behind her, finally broke through to the inborn realm and became a young master. She blamed that Feng Yuan was so bold that he came to her blatantly. He didn't know how many eyes were staring at him now. However, now she was with Qingong, and her identity had not been exposed for the time being. Feng Yuan's action seemed to take a lot of risks, but in fact, it was very safe. Why didn't you inform us that something happened to you? Feng Yuan transmitted the sound in silence with a trace of anger. If he didn't happen to hear about the byway building when he went to invite the craftsman, he and Chu Qingning would still be in the dark. It happened suddenly. Do you think that I have a way to hide the news from the Ministry of Penalty and send it to you? Suli raised her eyebrows and said with a smile, "However, it's good that you can find me. I want you to do one thing." "You?" Feng Yuan glared at her. Did she know how dangerous she was? If he didn't see her standing in front of him, he would really go crazy. However, when he met such a strong woman, he didn't dare to show his mind for fear of unpredictable consequences. He could only transmit the sound in silence helplessly. "What's the matter?" Suli transmitted the sound in silence seriously and became cold. "Go to find Chu Lu of the Hongyan house," and so on. Feng Yuan's expression changed slightly. It turned out that when they built the Linli building, Suli didn't stay idle. She used some unknown method to get a complete intelligence line, which was extremely helpful for the development of the Linli building in the future. But according to Su Li's tone, it seemed that this line was not so solid. After listening to Su Li's explanation, Feng Yuan nodded slightly and disappeared behind Su Li in the blink of an eye, as if he had never appeared. Even though he had just stabilized his realm at Xiantian Realm Level 1, he was no longer in existence that an acquired realm martial artist could surpass. No one knew whether it was intentional or not, but the way Qingong chose to go back to the Ministry of Penalty happened to pass the gate of the Su house. Qingong deliberately slowed down and whispered, "Shall we go in and take a look?" Suli shook her head without saying anything and motioned them to keep walking. She just scanned the Su house with her psychic awareness, but there was no breath of her eldest brother. There were only Su Zipei and her daughter in the house. Even Li Yulian and Su Qinghao were gone. Why did she go in? But where could Li Yulian go if she wasn't at home? At this time, Qinghao's class should be over. Qingong didn't insist or ask more. He took Suli away. Before long, in the dusk, Suli saw a slim woman walking towards her. Her face was completely covered by the cyan robe, which made it hard for people to see her clearly. Her pneuma was even more obscure. The two passed by each other without looking at each other. After a few steps, Suli suddenly felt something was wrong. She stopped and looked back, but saw that the latter had turned the corner and disappeared. "What's wrong?" Qingong looked back and asked. Suli shook her head calmly. "Nothing. I just mistook her for someone else." But she was not calm at all in her heart. That person had his pneuma, but it was definitely a woman. She couldn't be wrong. Su Li's eyes were as bright as the starry sky, and then as deep as an ancient well in an instant. The woman beside him. Even in the previous life, he never mentioned her or never mentioned her in front of her. As for the green-robed woman, she turned the corner and saw the Su residence on the street. The lips that were revealed under the green robe curled up. In the next moment, she had already snuck into the Su residence like a wisp of smoke. The guards were useless to her. Su Zipei was carefully feeding medicine to Zhu Yan in the room. After a period of recuperation, Zhu Yan's injury was not a big problem. Although she couldn't get out of bed and walk, she was much better than the previous state where she often wailed. No one knew how hot the fire of anger in Zhu Yan's heart was. Su Li, the bastard she picked up, now climbed over her head and became a powerful woman in Yunjing. Although her daughter took the jade pendant of Su Li's birth history, she was still unknown. All kinds of fantasies were broken. Coupled with all kinds of humiliation, she couldn't wait to eat Su Li's flesh and drink Su Li's blood. If she didn't hear from Zipei that Su Li was involved in the Ministry of Penalty and was secretly locked up, she was afraid that she would die of anger before she could get out of bed. Zhu Yan opened her mouth and was about to take a sip of medicine. Suddenly, her eyes widened. Su Zipei noticed that something was wrong and looked back subconsciously. She saw a cyan-robed woman standing less than 1 meter behind her. She was so scared that she fell from the chair. The hot medicine spilled on the quilt and some on Zhu Yan's face. Ah, it's so hot. Zhu Yan hurriedly wiped her face and finally calmed down the pain. Then she had time to look at the cyan-robed woman who suddenly came in. Judging from the figure, it was a woman. This is the mansion of the officer of the Supreme Judiciary. Who are you? How dare you break in? Zhu Yan's face was red because of the hot medicine. She tried to look dignified. However, she looked quite funny because of her paralyzed body. It was really embarrassing. Su Zipei was even worse. She crouched on the edge of the bed. It seemed that she could drive away the fear in her heart as long as she could be closer to her mother. Huh! A charming chuckle came from the cyan-robed woman. A sweet and magnetic voice sounded, "Miss Su, Mrs. Zhu, don't panic. I don't come with malice. Instead, we can make a deal." Zhu Yan was shocked. Several thoughts flashed in her mind in a moment. Then she stared at the cyan-robed woman and said, "Judging from your voice, you don't sound too old, so I'll call you Mississippi judging from your dress. I know that you are a noble lady in Yunjing. Zipei and I are just from the countryside. I really don't know how to make a deal with you." The cyan-robed woman smiled gently and said in a low and hoarse voice, "You hate Su Li and want her to die. I also have the same idea. So it is enough." Zhu Yan's eyes suddenly brightened. It seemed that there was a better way for her in front of her. This was a benefit that fell from the sky. She had nothing. No matter what the cyan-robed woman wanted, as long as she could kill Su Li, everything was worth it. In the gloomy sky, it finally began to rain, and it seemed to be gradually intensifying. In the Hongyan house, Chu Lu leaned against the window and was lost in thought. Her body was graceful and curvy. She was really enchanting. Listening to the increasingly heavy rain outside, she couldn't help but feel upset. She didn't even know that the rain outside wet her sleeves. Since the mysterious person who claimed to be Mr. Li gave an order last time, he seemed to disappear. He didn't check the results of her intelligence collection and didn't intend to continue to give orders. Wasn't she the informer of that person? Why didn't he contact her for a long time? An abandoned informer was of no value. Would that person give her the antidote of Hongshan powder? Squeak! The door behind her was gently opened. Chu Lu didn't look back and said in a reproachful tone, "I said to wait outside." "Chiu, when will you?" As she said, she turned back. The unhappiness on her face immediately turned into deep shock. It was not her personal maid, Chiu, who came in, but a tall and thin young man with a mask. If she couldn't see his face, she couldn't tell how old he was. But the only thing she was sure was that he was absolutely no more than 30 years old. In front of the beauty, Feng Yuan was calm. He held the sword in his right hand and waved his left hand to close the door automatically. Chiu, who was waiting outside the door, didn't notice it at all. She didn't even hear the sound of the door opening. Chu Lu's pupils shrank. Another inborn senior. Although the way of his appearance was different from Su Li's, Chu Lu couldn't help but think of Su Li because they were both young, inborn seniors. "Mr. Li?" Chu Lu asked tentatively. Feng Yuan said coldly, "Miss Chu, you are really smart. But the Lord has been busy recently and has no time to come in person. Please forgive me." His voice seemed to be polite, but from his tone, Chu Lu knew that the young man didn't mean to be polite at all. His cold eyes looked at her through the mask as if he was looking at a dead person. Chu Lu was scared. A cold-blooded and ruthless young man of the inborn realm who killed people like flax gradually formed in her heart. How much power did Mr. Li have in his hands? For a moment, the image of Su Li in Chu Lu's heart was more treacherous and terrible. No, why did Mr. Li send such a person here? Chu Lu quickly thought of the crux and couldn't help trembling. Looking at Chu Lu's changing expression, Feng Yuan remained silent all the time. His momentum became more and more oppressive, which made Chu Lu feel suffocated. She gritted her teeth and said, "Did I do something recently that dissatisfied the Lord? If so, please tell me clearly. Even if I die, I want to die with a clear explanation." Feng Yuan sneered and said, "Miss Chu, you are smart. Don't you know the reason why the Lord is angry? You underestimate the Lord's spies too much. Do you think that the Lord will be blind without you?" Chu Lu struggled in her heart. How could it be possible? At the banquet on the Tiana River, the first prince and her people were arranged. It was impossible to leak the information. After thinking for a while, Chu Lu summoned up the courage to look at Feng Yuan. She said unwillingly, "I don't understand. Please tell me clearly." Swish. Chapter 165. Chu Lu closed her eyes in horror. She shouldn't be so weak because of her cultivation. However, Feng Yuan's cold-bloodedness and strength shocked her severely. The wind of the sword almost touched Chu Lu's face. Although it didn't touch her face, Chu Lu's face was burning with pain. But at this moment, Chu Lu didn't care about the pain on her face. She shrank in the corner like a helpless and weak woman. She covered her heaving chest and just calmed down. He didn't kill me? Just now, she really thought that Mr. Li wanted to kill her. After such a shock, the last hope in her eyes disappeared. "Do you want me to tell you more?" Feng Yuan's voice was still cold. Chu Lu trembled slightly and said, "I dare not do it again. I did hide something, but I don't mean to hurt you. I just have doubts in my heart." At this moment, she couldn't wait to tell everything she knew in exchange for a chance to survive. "What doubts?" Feng Yuan sneered and said, "Do you want to keep the secret from the Huan sect or stay in the sect? Or do you want to know why the Lord hasn't contacted you for so long? Or do you want to cooperate with the first prince in exchange for glory, splendor, and wealth?" Chu Lu trembled and knelt down. She said, "I dare not." "Why don't you dare? I have seen you do it all the time," Feng Yuan said seriously. His acting skills seemed to be improved under the influence of Chu Qingning. He said, "Do you think that the Lord asked you to be an informer, and you can directly become one of us without any examination?" Chu Lu was shocked. She finally knew what the crux of the matter was. It turned out that what she did these days was observed by Mr. Li. No wonder he had never contacted her. What do I do these days? Chu Lu tried to recall what she did during this time. She had been keeping an eye on what Su Li told her. During this period, she also contacted the Huan sect, but she didn't expose Mr. Li. Only the first prince. Thinking of the stupid performance of the first prince that night and the sudden appearance of the young inborn expert who worked for Mr. Li, Chu Lu's heart had been tilted. At this moment, she was forced to this point, but she suddenly calmed down. She raised her head and said, "I only came into contact with the first prince half a year ago. On the surface, the first prince is cooperating with the Joyful Union sect, but in reality, I have a deeper cooperation with the first prince. For example, if necessary, I will reveal the whereabouts of the He Huan sect to him." Feng Yuan could sense that Chu Lu's voice trembled slightly. If she told the secret, it meant that she had no way out and could only rely on Su Li. Otherwise, Su Li just needed to release the news secretly, and Chu Lu would die miserably immediately. Chu Lu took the initiative to give them the evidence. Su Li completed half of the task. Feng Yuan was slightly relaxed, and even his tone eased. "Get up, Miss Chu. You are very smart and sensible. The Lord will treat you well in the future. As long as you don't betray the Lord, your life will not be in danger." Chu Lu nodded and glanced at Feng Yuan's calm eyes. Then she looked away as if she got an electric shock. Finally, she stood up slowly. Under Fang Yuan's command, she took the file about the first prince and handed it to Fang Yuan. After putting away the file, Chu Lu consciously said what Su Li had told her before. Su Zipei's itinerary is very simple. She goes out to buy medicine almost every 7 days. However, a spy recently came to report that she contacted with a man in a bamboo hat 2 days ago in the morning. But speaking of this, Chu Lu slightly frowned. There are seniors around that man. My people dare not get too close, so I don't know what they talked about. Fang Yuan said softly, I will truthfully report it to the Lord. After the first thing is done, we should talk about the second thing. What else? Chu Lu's beautiful eyes widened. She was scared enough just now. She didn't want to be hit by the sword again. It's just a common question. Fang Yuan's tone was a little careless, but what he said made Chu Lu, who had just recovered, completely pale. What's the matter with the fatal powder on Ma Ling? Can Miss Chu Lu explain it to the Lord? How could it be possible? Even in the Hahuan sect in Yunjing, only 3 or 4 people knew it. Except for her, the people who knew it were all loyal to the Hahuan sect. It was impossible for them to expose it. Don't guess. The Lord is proficient in the medical circle and the poison circle. She can detoxify your Hongshin powder. How can she not detect the fatal powder? Fang Yuan's expression was full of contempt and disdain, as if the secret prescription of the Hahuan sect was simply rubbish. Chu Lu gasped. The Hahuan sect was the most powerful poison circle in the entire Linhai continent. The fatal powder was a unique poison that made people tremble with fear. If the fatal powder was rubbish, the poisons in the entire Linhai continent were even worse than rubbish. Miss Chu Lu, it seems that you don't want to say it? Fang Yuan raised his eyebrows and said coldly. Chu Lu immediately came to herself. After a moment of silence, she began to explain. Nothing could be done more than 3 times. But she was very clear that in front of Mr. Li, there was no chance for her to make mistakes. This time, she not only couldn't hide it, but also had to explain it clearly and beautifully. Ma Ling's death was not caused by the Hahuan sect, but by young Master Wu Jin of the Wu family. Young Master Wu Jin secretly supported the first prince, while Ma Ling was a member of the Ma family. Although it is not clear which prince the Ma family secretly supported, it is definitely not the first prince. As she spoke, Chu Lu forgot to be nervous and said her own opinion. The Baiwei building is the property of Su Qingtan. Su Qingtan was marked as the third prince because of Ling Qinglan, so Master Wu Jin made a plan to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. He wanted to draw out the action of the person behind the Ma family. As for Su Li, it was just to please her sister, so he solved it conveniently. Fang Yuan frowned. It turned out that the situation was far more complicated than he thought. Su Li didn't say anything to them. Did she always bear it by herself? At the same time, Fang Yuan felt inexplicably distressed. He hated that their identities were sensitive and they didn't have powerful strength. So, they couldn't help at all. Su Li also saw it. If it hadn't happened suddenly, he might not even have the chance to run errands. Continue to observe Su Zipei. Don't relax. At the same time, secretly disclose the clues to Chun Gong of the Ministry of Penalty. Don't be found by your people. After giving the instructions arranged by Su Li in advance, Fang Yuan jumped out of the window without hesitation and disappeared from Chu Lu's sight. Phew! Chu Lu's tense body finally collapsed completely. She gasped for a few times and found that her back had been soaked with cold sweat. No matter the first prince, the Hahuan sect, or the mysterious Mr. Li, they were all fierce tigers for her. But for the slim chance of survival, she had to make a deal with them. Emma, where are you? Sister, I can't hold on any longer. The person who spoke was the only one who was listening to the bitter murmur. The night was as cold as water. Su Li sat alone at the table in the room and stared at the night sky in a daze. She was waiting for the sentries of the Ministry of Penalty to relax their vigilance. This was Qin Gong's room. The layout of the room was just like him. It was cold and solemn everywhere. Men and women were different. The Ministry of Penalty was very safe. In order not to make Su Li misunderstand, Chun Gong prepared to go back to his home these days. It was convenient for Su Li to act. Su Li didn't go out of the Ministry of Penalty until it was from 1 to 3 o'clock in the morning. She got the files that Feng Yuan had sorted out. After returning to the room and reading, Su Li didn't say anything for a long time. She didn't sweep away the ashes of the burned files on the ground until the dawn illuminated the room. Then she got up and continued to investigate the case with Chun Gong. Chun Gong wore a neat official uniform, which was a little different from his usual slovenly appearance. It was obvious that he just came out from the morning court. His face showed no joy or anger, but Su Li still sensed that he was in a bad mood. The Emperor ordered me to solve the case before August 15th. Chun Gong stretched out his hand and hammered the table, making a heavy sound, just like his mood. Su Li narrowed her eyes slightly. Today was the 7th day of August. It was only 8 days before August 15th. Why was the Emperor in a hurry? At this moment, she vaguely realized that the invitation of a eunuch might be much more dangerous than she thought. Oh, Lord Chun is really idle. Why don't you investigate the case in the morning? Instead, you are staring at the table in a daze? Suddenly, a lazy voice came from outside the yard. Su Li looked up and saw the appearance of the person. She couldn't help but raise her eyebrows slightly. The person was a handsome young man. He wore a golden robe with a large embroidered cloud pattern on it. His hair was combed in a neat bun. Just by looking at the way he walked and the two nostrils that were almost facing the sky, it could be known that he was not a talented man, but an extremely arrogant playboy. Shouldn't such a playboy stay away from the Ministry of Penalty? Why was this young man not afraid of Qin Gong, but ridiculed him? Qin Gong stood up and shielded Su Li behind him. His eyes were very cold. Child Ma, the Ministry of Penalty is not the Ma family. It is not a place where you can behave atrociously. Even if you're the son of Prime Minister Ma, you have no privilege here. Get out. Hearing that, the young man surnamed Ma immediately laughed and winked. Lord Chun, please calm down. Don't be angry, Lord Chun. I'm here to see how your investigation is going. After all, Ma Ling is my follower. I'll lose face if he dies without knowing the reason. And today, the Emperor said that you have to solve the case in 8 days. Now there are some clues. Can you tell me a little? Qin Gong remained calm and pointed at the door. Get out. If you don't leave, I will have to ask you to leave. The smile on the face of the young man, surnamed Ma, finally disappeared slowly. He spat at his feet and said in a gloomy voice, I don't want to stay in this broken place. Since Lord Chun is so confident, then this young master would like to see what you have to report 8 days later. Qin Gong raised his eyebrows and said in a deep voice, Guards. Finally, a trace of panic appeared on the face of the young man, surnamed Ma. He turned back and ran to the door. At the same time, he didn't forget to say some harsh words. Qin Gong, you don't have many days to show off. Wait and see. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.